I want to tell you a story. It's something that I need to get off my chest. A decade-old memory, one that's always scratching at the back of my mind like the twisted branches of a dead tree. It's a tale so harrowing that I've never told anyone about it. If you choose to listen, know that you'll learn things that may keep you away from forests for the rest of your life. You'll hear things that you wish you hadn't. For those willing to carry on. The story is set in a distant, desolate place called the Weeping Woods. You'll first need to understand why I was in that unspeakable place, so far from proper civilization, with 3 of my friends. We were social science students, all 4 of us, obsessed with culture, history, myth, religion, the works. We were looking to take on an honors research project, and naturally we wanted it to be something big, something original. It was Jack, my closest friend, who had suggested it. He was from Pennsylvania originally, specifically a town some 50 miles from the forest. He told us about the Weeping Woods. He told us about the Woodwick Walker. Of the 4 of us, Tina was the folklore junkie, so naturally she snapped at the suggestion. Come on, guys, we would get to do a road trip, camping, and our project all in one. And I bet good money that none of the other groups are going to research anything as creepy or as intriguing as what Jack just told us about. I couldn't argue with that, and I had no better suggestion. Marcus, our other friend, wasn't as eager. Spooky stuff really wasn't his thing, but he saw the rest of us agreeing and sighed. Alright, fine. So we packed up Jack's truck with everything that we would need to drive out of state for up to 2 weeks. Luckily for us, his Silverado was built like a dang dump truck. It could fit the 4 of us, all of our clothes, food, additional supplies, and most importantly, our recording equipment. Jack and I took turns driving, so the trek all the way up to Pennsylvania went by quick enough. We only stopped if we needed to get gas or to go to the bathroom. Along the way, Jack told us more about the legend. The Weeping Woods are named as they are supposedly because those who escaped them were always in tears. According to who? I asked. Jack shrugged. That's just the legend. As unlikely as it sounds, the tale took hold enough that nobody from my town liked to go there. He nudged his head at the rearview mirror. The reason that we brought the saws and towing cables are in case the road is stopped. The dingy old track that leads to the woods is used so little that it often ends up being blocked by fallen trees. Marcus's breath hissed through his teeth. Oh, we had to choose the scariest, most backwater place in the world, didn't we? Hell yes, Tina replied. You're damn right we did. So, I asked, why were people crying? I guessed that it had to do with the Woodwick Walker. Sort of, Jack said. They were crying because they had been forced to leave people behind. When asked about what had happened, they would always have a hard time talking about it. A few gave vague descriptions of a man in the woods who was part of the forest. Oh, Tina sighed. Oh, I love this shit. Please go on. Jack nodded. The one bit of info that solidified over the decades as the rule of the woods is this. Do not look at his face. When you encounter him, do not look up. His voice grew stiff as he explained. Close your eyes. If you can't do that, then stare at your feet. Nothing else. Jack, Marcus murmured. You got awfully serious just now. Jack cleared his throat, eyes fixed on the road. Oh, did I? Yeah, you definitely did, I agreed. Sorry, I still bug out over it a little, even after all these years. Have you been to the Weeping Woods? I asked him. I've only been to their edge. To tell you the truth, this legend scared the living shit out of me as a kid. The area around the house that I grew up in was forested too, and I would always imagine seeing him between the trees. I lifted an eyebrow. Well, if you're damn well traumatized by this thing, why did you suggest it for the project? The only way to overcome a fear is to face it, he said. True enough, Tina agreed. I have to admit the way that Jack talked about it during that ride got to me. Even Tina was a little more reverent about it all after that, and Marcus was so spooked that we were worried he would jump ship and hitchhike back south. but the four of us pressed on. The road meandered, rose and fell until eventually the rainy autumn woodland of Pennsylvania appeared on the horizon. It was late autumn, so the pretty colors had given way for the most part to barren trees with only a smattering of rusty brown leaves left on them. We drove through Jackstown, which in itself was so backwoods that it was hard to imagine any place more far-flung. There was one diner in the whole town, a local spot, offering breakfast on the overcast morning that we had arrived. We knew that we would be living off our camp food for the next while, so we popped in there. When we told the friendly waitress what we were up to, she stopped being nearly as nice. "You kids promised me one thing. You keep your eyes to the ground in them woods." We laughed a little at that. She didn't. I finished my food quickly, eager to get out of there. As we made it back to the truck, Jack said, "You see, it's a whole thing out here." "And you thought this was a good idea," Marcus groaned. "Chill out, guys," Jack went on. "It's only a legend, a story. We should stop by here again when we're done camping. A recorded interview with that waitress or any other locals who might have something to say. It would be great for the project," Tina said. "Hell," I said. "We ought to record an interview with Jack. He's got plenty to say too." Yeah, Jack sighed as he thumped his door shut. "Get in, we're losing daylight." "Just how far do we have to go?" I asked. 20, maybe 30 miles. No one actually knows how far the Weeping Woods are. The road there is kinda what? Marcus prodded. "It's kinda weird. You'll see." He wasn't kidding. Even the turn onto the road was decrepit. The pavement of the highway gave way to mulchy dirt, so littered with branches and fallen leaves that only Jack's trained eye could have spotted it. The road itself was derelict, a vestige of some bygone era. The way that it veered and twisted was illogical. Oftentimes we felt like we were turned all the way around and going back towards the highway. And the whole way, the only real indication that we were still on the road was the tall, gnarled trees lining the track. After a few minutes of winding through, I pointed at the compass on the Silverado's dashboard display. We've turned this way and that, yet the compass has read northwest the entire time. Jack gave a tentative nod. The road leads northwest into the Weeping Woods, no matter what. "That doesn't make any sense," Tina said. "I told you it'd be weird, didn't I?" Jack had an edge of irritability to him now, in his voice, in the knit of his brow. "You good, bro?" I gently said. "Sorry," he sighed. "My bad, guys. The road just gives me creeps is all. I'll chill out." It was just then that we rounded a dense thicket of trees and saw a massive fallen log blocking the road. "Oh, perfect," Marcus groaned. Jack cursed under his breath, his eyes darting left and right, peering through the trees. I raised my hands. "Hey now, we've got the tools to deal with this. No biggie, I'll take care of it." Tina shuffled about before raising her DSLR camera. "Marcus and I will take a few pictures while you deal with it, and maybe a video or two." She rolled down her window. "Sounds good." I unbuckled my seatbelt, opened my door, and jumped out. The ground that I fell onto would have been soft and inviting if not for the thick tree root that jabbed into the sole of my foot. As Jack clicked the ignition and shut the Silverado's engine down, the first thing that I noticed in the chilly autumn evening was the silence. A deep, encompassing quiet lay over the road, broken only by the hissing of the wind as it bothered the dark leaves that had yet to fall. "Damn," I whispered to myself, not entirely certain why I felt the need to keep my voice down. A dense fog had descended on the woodland. I suppose that was dampening the forest sounds. As I walked to the back of the truck, Jack stepped out and joined me. I told him, "Hey, I don't mind handling this on my own, you know." He shook his head. "Nah, I'll help you. It's all good." I nodded, though with how shifty he was being, I almost wished that he would have just stayed in the damn truck. In any case, we grabbed a couple of saws and walked over to the log. It was the corpse of a huge tree, and several of its thickest limbs were tangled with other still living trees at the edge of the road. I gestured toward those limbs and then looked at Jack. "What do you think?" "Yeah, we saw off the big arms, the jammed ones, and then we tow the log once it's loose. Nodding, I got started. Both Jack and I went hard. The sky was dimming, though it wasn't even late into the afternoon. The grinding and zipping of our saws seemed to violate the serenity of the forest, its near-perfect silence spoiled by the sounds of men. It was awfully uncomfortable, both because of the disturbance and because getting through those limbs was a ton of work. "We should have brought a frickin' chainsaw," I chuckled. "Heh," Jack murmured in reply. "It's weird," I called over the scraping of our saws. "The way it feels like it's almost evening. It's overcast today, but feels like it's too dim." "Yeah, that happens. Nothing unusual." Motion at the periphery of my vision turned me around before Jack had finished his sentence. I saw a pale limb, a ropey leg, vanish behind a tree. "What?" Jack asked. I looked at him. I saw something. Look." I turned around, pointing, and I saw that the pale leg that I had seen was just the twisted trunk of a stubby tree. It hadn't vanished behind the tree, it was still there, curling away and out of sight. Hell, it didn't even look all that much like a leg. I turned back to Jack. "I'm an idiot," I said with a grin. "It's nothing. It's hard to see through the fog. My mind is messing with me." Jack's eyes stayed fixed on the forest beyond me. "You're sure?" he asked. "Yeah, bro, it's nothing." I got back to sawing. Another 15 minutes droned by before we felt the tree was dislodged enough to be towed. We hooked up the towing line and revved the engine, pulled the dead tree by one end until it was out of the way. "Hey, one sec," Jack said as he hopped back out to reel in the towing cable. "It's dark," Tina pointed out. "Too dark." I craned my neck down to peer past the truck's ceiling and over the treetops. The gray sky looked like what I would expect it to be at about 7 or 8 p.m., though at a glance at the dashboard, it revealed the time to be just 1 p.m. Yeah, Jack wasn't kidding. This place is weird. "It's not too late to turn back," Marcus begged. "We can pick something else and start fresh." "No," Tina snapped. "We've already put way too much into this. Besides, the weirder the better, right? I recorded a bit while you guys were out explaining the situation." She lowered her voice. "I talked a little about Jack's behavior, too." I turned to glare at her. "Really?" "Of course," she said. "This little psychological quandary of his may well make for this project's best anecdotes." Well, she wasn't wrong about that. Still, it felt wrong to turn our friend into a case study without him knowing. "I don't like it," said Marcus. "You don't like any of this," Tina said. "It's fine." Jack climbed back into the truck, having coiled and stowed the towing cable. Finally, let's get going." He tossed the Silverado into gear and we set off. The dead log that had obstructed our path floated past my side of the truck as we went. Beyond, I thought that I saw another pale limb retreat behind a tree. This time I knew better than to dwell on a figment of my imagination. The road seemed to narrow as we delved further. To be more specific, it felt as though the twisting trees flanking it leaned in more. We saw less of the sky as branches from either side of the track mingled overhead. With each turn, the fog thickened and the daylight faded. "Hey, at least the road's staying clear," I said to the others as Jack flipped on the headlights. By then, I couldn't even see past the closest line of tree trunks, and honestly, I was glad. Keeping my eyes set steady on the road ahead was simpler, more calming. "Oh, there's a little more to the legend," Jack said after some time. The rest of us looked at him. "The victims of the walker. They're said to remain bound to the weeping woods. Their spirits." He glanced at the rear view, proudly meeting Tina and Marcus's eyes. "Some claim they've seen those spirits, trying to leave the woods but never able to get far. They're trapped," Tina remarked, "unable to move on to an afterlife." "Something like that," replied Jack. The four of us had little else to say the rest of the way. The constant rumble of the Silverado, coupled with the deepening dark, lulled us into a stupor. It was 2:45 p.m. when we had reached the end of the road. As the truck pulled into the small clearing, I started. "Holy shit, there's a car." Jack looked over to the side of the truck. I heard the other two shuffling as they straightened to look. "Oh God," Marcus whispered. "How common is that?" asked Tina. Jack cleared his throat. "Not very. Still, though, there's a legend surrounding this place. We aren't the only intrepid folk to brave the Weeping Woods." I peered into the car and it seemed empty. Probably just somebody exploring like we are. "Yeah," Jack agreed. "So," Tina said, "this is it then?" "Yeah," answered Jack. "Past that tree line, that's the Weeping Woods." "It looks the same as the rest of these woods," I pointed out. "It's not," Jack replied. "Come on, the sooner we make camp, the sooner that we can relax." He swung his door open and stepped out. "Oh, screw me," Marcus groaned as he kicked his door open. "Let's get it over with." He jumped out and Tina and I followed suit. As the others unloaded the truck, I walked over to the derelict car. It was an old Toyota, rusted all along its frame with so much grime over its windows that it was tough to see through. There was no way that someone had been driving behind that dirty windshield. This thing had been here for a while. I placed the bottom of my palm on the window and rubbed away as much of the grime as I could, and then I lowered myself and peered inside. There wasn't anything unusual in there. Some junk on the passenger floor, a travel mug in the cup holder, a tote bag in the back. The only thing that caught my attention was a slip of paper on the dash. I rounded the hood until I was standing over that bit of the windshield. I spat on the glass and wiped again. The slip of paper had bold handwriting in all caps that read, "Gonna look, I have to. Tell Lorena that it was a crash." I backed away from the hood. The trees hissed as a gust of wind swept through the clearing. "Guys," I called. They walked over. "What is it?" Tina asked. "Read this." I waited for them to each take a look. "Oh God," Marcus whispered. Tina asked Jack, "Have people been known to come here to commit suicide? You know, like the suicide forest in Japan?" Jack shook his head. "No, not that I know of." "Well, this person seriously did not come back," Marcus said. "He could have gotten lost, maybe," I offered. We all looked at Jack and he shrugged. Marcus threw his hands up. "At what point do we concede that this forest is actually dangerous?" "You're an academic, Mark," Tina said. "Do you really believe that the Woodwick Walker is real?" "I'm not saying that," he spat back. "But legends arise for a reason, don't they? In this case, I would argue that reason was to justify the dangers of this cursed place." Tina scowled to herself and then she looked at me. "How are you feeling about all this?" I looked from her to Marcus. "I'm more curious than scared at this point. Sorry, Mark." Tina looked at Jack. "And you?" "I want to see this through." She looked back to Marcus. "Well?" Marcus groaned for what must have been the 50th time that day. "All right, whatever, let's go." As we swung on our backpacks and grabbed our other bags, the sky dimmed until it seemed only twilight remained. Jack sighed sharply, nodded at the three of us, and then led the way into the Weeping Woods. I almost expected some supernatural shift in the air the moment that we had crossed that tree line, but it was as anticlimactic as you would expect. If anything was off, it was the same stuff that I had already been bothered by. The extraordinary silence, the unusual darkness, and every so often a pale limb fading into the gloom. We hiked on, our shuffling footfalls mingling with the sounds of creaking wood. Jack marked the trees as we went so that we would be able to navigate back to the truck. "How far?" Marcus asked after some 30 minutes. However far we want, I guess," Jack answered. "There's no specific place for us to go," Tina said. "Nah, once you're in, you're in. I just figured we would go a good ways. We drove so far for this, might as well make it count, right?" No," Marcus rebuked. "Not right. We're stopping here." His bags thumped onto the forest floor, his backpack followed. I looked around. "Jack, is the spot okay?" And good as any, I guess. Well, then I'm cool with it. Let's make camp. The four of us got to work. It was dark enough then that we had to click on our flashlights. I raised the tents, Jack gathered firewood, and Marcus got started on supper, and Tina set up some of the recording equipment. We didn't talk much for the next 20 minutes. I think that we all felt the same yearning to be done with the work and settle in. It had been a long day, the type that strained the mind, and we were ready to loosen up. Despite the autumn moisture over the wood, Jack managed to get a fire going at the center of camp. I pitched our 4 tents in a circle nearby and then unfolded our chairs right around the stone circle of the fire pit. Marcus placed the cooking pot by the flames and the 3 of us sat down just as Tina had finished with the tripods. The cameras and microphones held an eerie sort of vigil around camp. I checked my phone as Tina took her seat across from me. It was 4:42 p.m. I looked up, straight up, and saw the faint gray light peeking through the treetops. A breeze brushed fallen leaves past my feet. Marcus asked me, "Do you have any bars?" I glanced at my phone again and then shook my head. No, me neither. My reception dropped 1 bar at a time, starting from the moment that we turned onto that winding road. "I told you guys it was going to be weird," Jack mumbled. We spoke softly for a while longer as the stew broiled. Through that time, every one of us kept looking over our shoulders. The way the darkness seeped into those woods was abnormal. By the time that we grabbed our bowls and started to eat, it was pitch black beyond the nearest circle of trees. As we ate, the winds that had been hissing through the woods had slowed. They would still come every 10 or 20 seconds, but it was like the trees weren't moving in reply anymore. Instead of the rustling leaves and creaking wood, I would just hear an eerie sighing as the air wafted through. And that darkness, the dark encroached like it was alive. The shadows past the circle of trees pushed into our modest campsite, like they were trying to get to us. But each time that dark crawled forward, a crackling of our campfire would send it back. Of course, these were my imaginings, or so I thought at the time. "That was delicious," she chirped. "Thank you, Mark." Don't mention it." "Well," she continued, "it's probably too dark to venture out or film much of anything, and yet it's way too early to hit the hay. So I suggest that we lean into the whole camping in the woods cliché and exchange ghost stories." I laughed, and so did Jack. Marcus didn't. "Hell yeah," I said as I clapped Marcus on the shoulder. "Oh, come on, Marcus, surely you've got a spooky tale or two." And so we sat around our little reservoir of warmth and light and told our cheesy ghost stories. To all of our surprise, the scariest story by far came from Marcus. It was a tale about the haunting of little Landry, but that's a story for another day. Let's get back to the Weeping Woods. After a couple of hours of hanging about, drinking tea and discussing what we would do come dawn, the 4 of us agreed to call it a night. We were exhausted after the long drive north and the trek through the woods, and the sooner that we slept, the more energy we would have to venture out at dawn. And so we snuffed out our campfire, the embers hissing as cool water consumed them, and we crawled into our tents. There was one for each of us. Once I had gotten my belongings in order and felt comfortable in my bedding, I clicked my flashlight off. A little light leaked in from the others' tents as they shuffled around, and then they turned off their lights too. What remained was perfect, absolute darkness. I held my hand out right in front of my face and moved it side to side, and I couldn't see a thing. And apart from the odd cough or shuffle from one of my companions, the only noise that remained was the ethereal sighing of the wind. As creepy as it was, there was a certain coziness to being bundled up in a sleeping bag while surrounded by nature. Plus, as I had mentioned, I was exhausted, and so I managed to drift off to sleep. The coming hours were marked by a fitful slumber. I had nightmares in there in that forest, but I couldn't tell you what they were about. It's like I know but don't know. All I can say is that I was racked by dark dreams for the few hours that I was asleep. And then I woke to the sound of creaking wood. My breath caught in my throat when I heard it. Fear danced up my spine. I know, we're in the forest. Of course, there was creaking wood, but no. this creaking was different. It was long, slow, with whispers hidden within. This creaking was alive. Slowly, I sat up within my tent, head swiveling one way and then the next in the dark as I tried to ascertain which direction the noise came from, but I couldn't. It was as though the sound came from all directions. There was no longer any wind, only the creaking. I wondered whether my friends were awake too. If I was alone and hearing the sound, would they believe me if I told them about it come the morning? I considered calling out to them, but the truth was that I was so damn scared in that moment that no words would have come. Images flashed in my mind as my imagination conjured a visage to match that horrible creaking. And then I heard it. I nearly missed it over the din of the forest, but I heard it. Jack's quivering voice, just barely louder than a whisper. "He's here. Stay in your tents. Don't look at him." The way that he uttered the words sent ice through my veins. My limbs grew as stiff as the tree trunks surrounding our camp as I held my breath and closed my eyes. The creaking came closer. I heard shuffling from one of the other tents, and it made me angry. Who the hell was making so much noise? The whispering within the creaking grew louder. I could almost make out words within the hissing gibberish. And then a blinding light came on, so bright against the forest dark that I noticed it through my eyelids. Instinctively, I opened my eyes and looked up. Through my tense mesh fabric, I saw a figure standing with a flashlight in hand. By the shape and height and trembling of the figure, I knew that it was Jack. Concern for my friend turned out to be a stronger force than that of fear. "Jack, what are you doing?" He raised a hand in the direction of my tent. "Quiet. Close your eyes and be quiet. I'm fine." The tone of his voice told me that I had to obey. I closed my eyes again and held my breath. The creaking drew even nearer. It sounded like it was just outside of my tent. Wood straining and flexing under a sort of weight. Jack's breathing had grown ragged. There were hints of whimpering accompanying each panting breath. I wasn't religious, but at that moment I nearly started praying to whatever God might listen. I would have done so, in fact, if the creaking didn't stop. But it did. All at once, a sighing breeze washed over our campsite, and the oppressive creaking presence that had stood among us was gone. And as I opened my eyes and saw a flashlight laying on the forest floor, I realized that Jack was gone too. I crawled toward my tent flap and unzipped it. "Jack," I called. As I ambled out, I saw Tina doing the same, her eyes wide in the dark. "He's gone," she whispered. A second later, Marcus's flap opened and he poked his head out. His expression told me that he too had been awake for all of it. "Jack!" I cried, far more loudly than I was comfortable with. There was no reply. I picked up his flashlight, swinging it around in every direction, squinting into the gloom beyond the trees. There was nothing, no one. I pointed the flashlight at the ground where it had laid. An impression in the mulch clearly marked the flashlight, as well as the spot where Jack had stood, but there were no obvious marks leading away from there. Tina startled me as she barked a laugh. "Oh, this is great. This is absolutely fantastic." Scowling at her, I said, "What are you talking about?" "Oh, it's a prank, of course. Just a prank. Jack got us good." She shook her head, chuckling. I tried to think clearly despite my racing heart. After a moment, I nodded. "Well, I suppose that's the most logical thing to assume." "Are you kidding me?" Marcus whisper shouted. "You both heard the wood, didn't you?" "Yeah, but we are in a forest, aren't we?" I replied. "In a creepy forest, no less," Tina agreed. "I reckon Jack pulled the prank of the century on us." She pointed at some of the recording equipment. "And he's got the whole dang thing recorded. We'll never live this down." "Right," I said. I told Marcus. "We'll look at the footage. That'll settle your worries, won't it?" He nodded. "Let's." Tina gathered the one camera that was pointed at our camp. It was cold, so I struck up another fire in the pit as she looked through the footage. I glanced at my phone as I settled into my chair. It was 12:15 a.m., just past midnight. "Ha!" she burst out after another minute searching. "I told you so." She leapt from her seat, rounding the fire before crouching between Marcus and I. As she hit play on the camera, we saw a grainy image of our tents, lit only by Jack's flashlight as he stood amidst them, looking around. I briefly thought that I could make out a couple of pale figures in the dark background, but quickly dismissed the notion given how unclear the image was. "Is there audio?" I asked. "Should be, yeah," answered Tina. "Then why is there no noise?" We must have been imagining things." A few tense moments of the video passed before Jack froze. His flashlight pointed in the direction of nothing that we could see. Maybe it was something off camera. The 50mm lens captured the breadth of our camp, but not much beyond it. Or maybe he was pranking us after all. In any case, he set the flashlight down even as he craned his neck to keep his eyes fixed on whatever he was looking at, and then he walked in that same direction, the light shining brightly off his back as he went. He wasn't moving quickly or slowly, just steadily, and that confirmed that there was audio on the recording, because we heard the crunching of leaves as Jack departed. "You see?" Tina said as she hit pause on the video. "He pranked the hell out of us." She straightened up, letting the camera rest on its strap, and cupped her hands around her mouth. "Jack, come out already. The prank's done, you win." If he was actually hiding somewhere in the dark, he didn't even make a peep. Tina called out a couple of more times, and I even joined in on the last one, insisting that Jack come back. There was no answer. "You still think this is a prank?" came Marcus. I looked at him uncertain. Tina sternly said, "Yes." Marcus frowned. "Well, then where the hell is Jack?" Tina looked away and I stood up with a sigh. "Look, whatever this is, we've got to track him down one way or another, right? We're in the woods and far from any sort of help. Even if this is just a really overdone prank, we can't risk him getting lost or hurt out there." "Oh, screw me." Marcus groaned as he pressed his face into his hands. "Yeah, that's fair," Tina agreed. "It's chilly. Let's bundle up a little, grab as many lights as we can carry, and head out. I'll also keep this camera running." "I'll grab a knife," Marcus said. Tina and I looked at him uncomfortably. "To mark the trees," he said as he rolled his eyes, "so we can actually find our way back." "Oh," I replied, "smart." A couple minutes later, we set out into the forest in the direction that the flashlight had been pointing when Jack left it. We called out his name, our voices losing some of their optimism with each repetition. Our lights were less effective than they should have been. The darkness seemed to devour them, making it hard to see further than 20 or so feet away. Fear and frustration mingled in my chest as I looked left and right, peering through the trees, shouting as loudly as my courage let me. "Jack! Jack!" Marcus cursed. "I've marked 15 trees, guys. We should really turn back." "Sure. We'll head back and then start out again in a different direction." As we turned around, a sharp crack it sounded. Tina screamed. Gasping and looking over her shoulder, I braced for what I might see. "What, Tina? What is it?" She was looking down with one hand placed over her chest. Oh God." She stepped back. "Come look." Marcus and I padded towards her. A broken old bone lay in Tina's boot print. "It's human," she whispered. "What?" I spat, genuinely startled. "How do you know?" "Because I studied this sort of thing in a recent course. That is without a doubt a human femur." Grimacing, I brushed the mulch aside with my boot, revealing more of the skeleton. "You don't think?" I frowned at him. "You mean?" I glanced back down at the skeleton. "Oh, no, definitely not. These bones are old. There's no way." "Maybe it's the guy who had parked his car at the edge of the woods," offered Tina. Maybe," I murmured as I uncovered more of the corpse. By the time that I had finished, the three of us were looking down on a full human skeleton. The hands and arms were folded over the rib cage, with most of the hand bones resting on the sternum, at the center of the chest. Mixed in with those hand bones was a bundle of sticks. "Jesus Christ," Tina muttered. She was still recording, making sure not to miss a thing. "Let's hurry back," I said. A sense of dread was settling in. Maybe I was being impractical, but I couldn't help it. Marcus led the way as he could best recognize the tree markings. Our pace was hurried, frantic even. Even Tina was spooked. The few times that I looked at her, I saw her mouth pursed to a thin line. In hindsight, it's silly to think that it was the dead one that spooked us so much, the one that we didn't even know. Marcus stepped back into camp and immediately gathered wood for a new fire. Tina paced back and forth, keeping to herself. I was antsy and restless. "We need to head out again. Jack is still out there." Marcus and Tina looked at me, and Tina said, "Where would we even look?" "I don't know anywhere. Pick a direction." I aimed my flashlight opposite from the way that Jack had left, shining its light through a row of trees, and I gasped. I saw a pair of legs poking out from behind one of the trunks. By the style of pants, I knew at once that it was Jack. My heart hammering in my throat, I ran over, and I rounded the tree trunk. Relief washed over me as I found him alive and seemingly unhurt. "Jack!" I cried as I lowered myself next to him. He didn't respond, though I could clearly see the rise and fall of his chest. His eyes stared listlessly up at nothing in particular. His arms were folded over his chest, hands resting right at his center. In his hands was a bundle of sticks. "Jack!" Tina cried. "Are you all right?" "What's wrong with him?" whispered Marcus. Not only did he not reply, but he didn't even move. His eyes didn't shift, nothing. This must be part of the prank," Tina muttered. I scowled at her. "Weren't you worried just now?" I trailed off as I recognized the confusion in her eyes. She wasn't thinking clearly. Hell, none of us were at that point. "We gotta get out of here," Marcus said. Tina replied, "But the project..." "Look, we'll come back for the equipment and maybe we'll continue with the work. But right now we need to find Jack some help." I shook my head and grimaced. "He's not okay." "How do we even get him back to the truck?" said Marcus. Jack was a big guy, well over 6 feet tall. There was no way that we would be able to lift him all the way. "Let's get him up and see if he'll walk between the two of us." Marcus nodded and we got to it. The bundle of sticks spilled onto the forest floor as we yanked him upright. Jack was limp as we raised him up, and even once we had him between us, his legs dragged as we walked. "Jack, enough already," Tina said. Her tone was desperate, not annoyed. "The joke's over." "Damn it," I cursed. "All right, Marcus, we'll take one arm each and drag him. There's not much else that we can do. Tina, you guide us. Take Jack's flashlight, the brightest one, and look for his markings. We need to get to the truck." She did as I asked, though she didn't say anything. She even set down the camera that she had been so diligently filming with through the night, leaving it there by the tree. We set off, and Marcus and I groaned as we pulled Jack, his legs leaving grooves in the mulch. We were facing away from Tina, so we had to manage in the dark, and that darkness felt like it was grabbing at us, seeping into us. It's hard to put into words, but it was an awful feeling. The ghostly sighing of the wind seemed louder now than it had been for most of the night. I wondered what time it was, probably 1 or 2 in the morning, a few hours from dawn. The next moment was the first of the expedition that truly damaged my mind. Marcus saw it first and he yelled in terror. I looked across to him, and I saw a skinny, pale figure with limbs too long to be natural and flesh too ropey to be human. It was standing just close enough, and with just enough faint light glancing off its skin, I was sure that my eyes were not deceiving me. The creature's drooped and twisted mouth parted to let out an agonized sigh as it lifted a lanky arm towards Marcus and I. I joined Marcus in screaming, and we both tugged hard on Jack's arm and practically sprinted toward the glow of Tina's light. "What happened?" she said, spinning to shine the light right into our eyes. "There's something," Marcus shrieked. "Run!" Was it the Woodwick walker that we had just seen? I wasn't sure, but the fact that we had both looked right at it and seemed fine told me that it probably wasn't. As we scurried through the woods, I kept glancing into the dark, fully expecting to see that horrid thing ambling after us. What happened instead was an abrupt ceasing of the wind and natural din of the woods. The way the sighing breeze and shifting branches ceased to make any noise at all caused the three of us to freeze in place. Again, I felt ice in my bloodstream. Marcus and I exchanged terrified glances. And then we heard it. Creaking wood. My heart raced. As the creaking grew louder, only one thought rang clear in my mind. I opened my mouth and whispered sternly to my friends, "Don't look at him." Marcus clenched his eyes shut. I looked down at Jack and he was still staring idly up at the sky. I clapped my hands over his eyes and then shut my own and held my breath. The whispering that was hidden in the creaking reached my ears, same as it had earlier that night. I strained to make sense of the whispers, but I couldn't, even though it felt like I should have been able to make out the words. When Tina spoke, my stomach sank. "Oh, screw this," she hollered. "I'm not playing this dumb game anymore." "Tina, be quiet," I whispered as softly as I could manage. She laughed. "Oh, look at you two with your eyes shut. You're grown men, both of you. Give me a break, there's nothing." She paused. "There's nothing." While she didn't say anything else, her breath quickened. I heard a thud and through the lids of my eyes saw shifting light. She had dropped the flashlight. A few soul-scathing moments passed before the creaking had ceased, and when I opened my eyes, Tina was gone, though we hadn't heard her walk away as expected. "It's over, Marcus," I quietly said. As Marcus opened his eyes, I saw that his cheeks were wet with tears. "We need to leave this place." Okay, let's get Jack back to the truck," I agreed, "and then I'll come back and find Tina." Marcus nodded. We got back to dragging Jack, pausing every few moments to shine the light over the trees to ensure that we were going the right way. The woods were still pitch dark, and I hadn't forgotten about the awful pale creature that had approached us. The minutes or hours that passed before we made it back to the Silverado were nightmarish. But we did make it finally. Oh, thank God," Marcus moaned. "Thank you." We opened the back door and grunted as we shoved Jack up in there. Once he was securely in the truck, I turned back towards the Weeping Woods. "I'm sorry, I'm not going back," Marcus said. "Hey, I know," I interrupted. "Stay and watch over Jack. If he takes a turn for the worse, just leave without us, get him to a hospital. Otherwise, give me a few hours at least. I'll find Tina and get back." As I stepped back into the Weeping Woods, I marveled at my own courage. I suppose that when you're faced with either taking on something terrifying or letting somebody that you care about die, the choice becomes easy. For me, at least, it was. But God, did I hate it. I felt like I was losing bits of myself as I stomped back into that loathsome place. At the edges of my vision, I kept seeing pale limbs and couldn't tell if they were just branches or actual monsters. But at that point, it didn't matter. I was pressing on regardless, and there was no use in scaring myself further. I assumed that I would find Tina laying listlessly somewhere like Jack had been. I also remembered that we found Jack right by the place where he had first vanished. So I just followed the grooves of Jack's legs that he had left in the mulch, retracing our path through the woods and hoping that I would spot Tina soon. Again, minutes or hours went by. It was impossible to tell in the woods and in the dark. I marched all the way back to our camp without finding Tina, and then I turned back and tried looking again along the same path. It was on the return trip that I saw her legs protruding from behind a tree. I ran over, calling out to her. She was laying there, blank eyes staring upwards, hands folded over her chest, with a bundle of sticks clutched firmly in them. I knew that it was useless, but I still tried to rouse her. Tina, please say something. Are you okay? Can you hear me?" She didn't reply. She didn't move. Angrily, I snatched her hand and tossed these sticks aside. "We're getting out of here," I whispered harshly, as I lowered my arms under her back and legs and I lifted her. Dawn had finally come, so I just left the flashlight behind as I struggled back in the direction of the truck. The pale creatures were all around me at that point, sighing in a sort of accursed chorus, ropey limbs reaching for me. A few of the pale hands actually brushed against me, the long bony fingers running over my jacket. I ignored them and pressed on. Better than this than the walker itself, I figured. And just as the thought had crossed my mind, the sighing had ceased. Total silence blanketed the woods. Silence until the disquiet creaking of wood reached my ears. It was the third time that I had faced it that night, but the first time that I had faced it alone. And that was the moment that truly ruined me. The moment that shook me so badly that it's haunted me in all of the years since. I fell onto my knees, setting Tina down and placing a palm over her blank eyes. Somehow in that moment of sheer terror, I couldn't bring myself to fully shut my own eyes. I just felt too vulnerable, I suppose. So as the creaking grew louder, I tilted my head down and stared at the ground between my knees. A feeling in me prodded, urging me to look up, to see what it was that was approaching to protect myself. I resisted. My eyes remained fixed on the mulch immediately below me. The whispering and the creaking it was angry this time. There was real hatred in it. I could sense it, though I still couldn't make out the words. Like the other times, I wasn't sure what direction it was approaching from. The creaking and whispering was all around, and it was in my head. I held strong, I didn't look. Even when I could sense that something was right next to my head, its breath brushing the skin of my neck, I did not look. As it circled me, I saw one of its legs come into view. In the dim dawn light, I saw a limb of both wood and flesh, broken and twisted down its length. Sap and blood seeped from the places where it had been bent and fractured. Again, the temptation sounded in me to look up at the thing's face. Again, I resisted. The thing started to make a new noise from deep within its gullet. It was a wet and guttural croaking. It was a sound that can't be put into words. It was something that shouldn't have ever been heard by anyone. I kept my eyes down as the thing circled me, breathed on me, croaked at me. For seconds that felt like minutes, that felt like hours, I stayed still. Until finally, oh finally, it went away. The croaking turned to angry whispering, and the angry whispering turned to creaking as the walker left. Eventually, there was no noise at all. Going entirely on instinct at that point, I gathered Tina into my arms again and set off in the direction of the truck. When we made it back to the clearing, Marcus merely gawked at me as I placed Tina in the back seat with Jack. I got into the driver's seat, twisted the ignition, and got us the hell out of there. Marcus and I didn't speak a word for the entire drive to the nearest hospital. The doctors and nurses did all sorts of testing, both in that wayside Pennsylvania hospital and at the far better ones back home. None of them could come up with anything useful. They mostly agreed that at best, Jack and Tina were in some sort of catatonia, and that they might snap out of it one day. At worst, they were in a vegetative state that was irreversible. To this day, Jack and Tina are cared for in a special care facility. To this day, they're just as they were when we had found them in those woods, eyes staring blankly, bodies limp. My poor friends likely would have been put down by now if not for one detail that tells us that they're still there in a way. They show a slow and steady interest in sticks, branches, things like that. They don't respond to anything else, but if there's a stick laying nearby, they'll start wading toward it. And when they've gathered a satisfactory bundle of the little pieces of wood, they'll place it against their chest and continue to hold it there. As for Marcus and I, well, Marcus and I never spoke again after that. I did try to reach out to him a few times, but he ghosted me. Can't say that I blame him. What we went through was life-altering. He probably just wants to stay as far away from all of that as possible. I'm not sure what he's gotten up to in the years since. For myself, I finished my degree without bothering with the honors thesis. I actually lost my passion for social sciences altogether after what I went through. I've settled for an average job with average pay in a town that's as far away from any forest as can be. I've also cut down all the shrubs around my house. I even paid my neighbors, and this was a hefty sum, mind you, to get rid of their trees and bushes. I take time every day to rake my yard and get rid of any twigs that may have found their way into my property. Even so, in my town far from any woods and in my house cleansed of any twigs, oftentimes when I'm sitting indoors just minding my business, I'll hear it. The unmistakable, horrible creaking of wood. It was almost 15 years ago now that I first met one of the most interesting people that I know. True to that nature, I also met him in one of the most interesting and unexpected ways. I was out hiking on a trail in Washington State. It was a remote area, but one which I was fairly familiar with. On that particular day, I decided to venture far beyond the hiking trail that I normally took, just for the sake of exploration. After some time, I entered a sunlit gully which led up to a local mountain, rife with blooming conifers and serene, glistening pines. I was alone that day, and I felt my soul rejuvenate a bit with every breath of the fresh mountain air. After probably 20 minutes, I was well off the beaten trail, and I found something worrying. I was about to take another step when I paused mid-stride, seeing a circular, jagged metal ring laying just beyond a small shrub. It was a good thing that I didn't put my foot down, as the ring proved to be an improvised bear trap. "What are you doing out here?" A gruff male voice suddenly shouted from somewhere unseen. I looked around, trying to find the person who had spoken, when he chose to step forward and reveal himself. An older man sporting a long gray beard then emerged from the brush. He had amber skin, long grayish-black dreadlocks, and a scar on his right cheek. He wore a raggedy brown coat that looked hand-woven, and old jeans patched up in multiple spots by mismatched fabric. His eyes burned like campfires, and his hands clutched a bolt-action rifle while his lip cradled a sizable wad of chew. "I asked you a question, son. What are you doing here?" After fumbling on my own words for a moment, I was finally able to piece together a response. "I was just out hiking. I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone lived out here." The man seemed to silently inspect me for a moment. I felt my pulse soar in my chest as I wondered what he had intended on doing. We were, after all, completely alone out there. "You see that trap back there, son?" He pointed to the same trap that I had narrowly avoided stepping on a minute earlier. I nodded and swallowed hard. He tilted to the side and spewed a mouthful of tobacco spit into the dirt. "Guess that means I gotta hide him better." He stared at me completely deadpan, and I felt my heart plunge into the depths of my stomach. I thought he was some kind of maniac hillbilly cannibal, hell-bent on having me for lunch then. But then he suddenly burst into a fit of raspy laughter. I was left there confused and partially horrified, as the man continued to cackle for several seconds. "Oh, I'm just kidding, son." He wiped a tear from his eye and recomposed himself as I continued silently debating whether or not I should run like hell. He slung the rifle over his shoulder and smiled at me. "No apologies, buddy. My wife always said that my sense of humor was a bit dark." I eyed the man over, and he suddenly seemed less sinister than he had a moment ago. There was a sense of jubilance in his gaze, like he was actually happy to see me. It's hard to explain, but it kept me from running. I forced a laugh myself. A good thing for both of us, I guess. This hiking is giving me a major case of swamp butt. Can't imagine that I would taste too good. The man burst out into laughter once more, and this time I joined in. In that moment, I knew that I had found a new friend. The man formally introduced himself not long after as Mark Hastings. After conversing for a while, he told me that he had lived in that particular area for a couple years at least, though admitted that he didn't know exactly how long he had been there. He said he left the city life behind in '96 and seemed quite surprised when I told him the current year was 2025. Mark's accent was something which struck me as quite interesting, as it was one I couldn't quite pin down. He had a slight southern drawl and yet at times also sounded as though he may have had a bit of British influence as well. He pronounced words like again as again, and had a strange vocal inflection. The best way I can really describe it is the way somebody speaks in old black and white movies, proper and yet somehow country. We got to talking and he told me more about himself. He said that he used to do construction back in the day, but when his wife had gotten sick with cancer, it really changed things for him. He said that she battled it for almost 3 years, but eventually had lost the fight. Afterwards, he was left alone and with a mountain of medical bills to account for. Rather than pay them off and attempt to move forward, Mark chose a different path. It's funny, you work your butt off for years, begin building the life that you want with the woman of your dreams, and then it all just falls apart for no good reason. Then when you're at your lowest, good old Uncle Sam comes in and slaps you with a bill that you ain't ever gonna be able to pay back. So I say, to hell with them. To hell with their taxes and their debt. Out here, I'm truly free. There ain't nothing left for me in the real world anyways. There was a distinct glimmer of pain behind his gray eyes as he said it, and I felt myself feeling sorry for him. He wasn't at all what I had expected when we first met. Just a normal guy whose life fell apart through no fault of his own. In a way, I found it sort of admirable. The system had beat him down, and rather than just accept it and be a good little wage slave, he left it all behind with one big middle finger. I visited Mark pretty often after that, and I tried to make the trek out to see him at least once a month. He always seemed to have a smile on his face when I came to visit. Soon enough, he even invited me back to his cabin for a fresh meal and some drinks. I was a bit hesitant at first, but I decided to accept. Part of me expected him to prepare a meal of squirrels and tree bark when he had first offered, but I couldn't have been more wrong. Mark made us a fresh rabbit stew with some homegrown potatoes and bread that he had made from scratch. On top of that, he even had his own homebrewed ale to wash it all down. It was surprisingly delicious, and it really made me admire Mark more for his resourcefulness. He wasn't just some weirdo in the woods. He was truly a man of the land. His cabin was reminiscent of one that would have been used for early 18th century trappers. A handcrafted stone chimney was his only source of heat, while animal pelts covered the walls and strips of meat were drying on his jerky rack. There were 2 couches in the main room constructed of whittled wood and bearing hand-woven pillows stuffed with feathers. He had no electronics of any kind, claiming that he didn't need those technologic doohickeys anyways. Mark had 2 bloodhounds, Rally and Daisy, that lived there with them and were his only real companions. I eventually asked if he ever missed civilization or got lonely out there, but he immediately refuted the question. For a while, yeah, but not anymore. It's easy to forget about society when society already forgot about you. I really grew to admire Mark and even cherish our friendship. Over our many meetings, he would tell me stories about his life, told me all about his business and his wife before she had passed away. The way that he spoke about her in particular truly broke my heart. He was a man who met his soulmate and built a life that he loved with her, only to have it all ripped away by the cruel hands of fate. More than anything though, Mark was already ready to tell me how much he hated the government. I think that was what made me like him the most. One night, he and I were drinking some of his homebrewed honey ale and chilling around his campfire. He had just got done telling a story about a 5-point buck that he had narrowly missed a few weeks earlier. He finished with admitting that he had heard some weird, loud noise from the woods that scared it off before he could fire. That detail got me thinking, and since I've always been a fan of the paranormal and whatnot, I figured I would go ahead and ask him, "You ever seen anything really creepy out here?" Mark's eyes opened wide, and he immediately lowered the mug from his lips. He wiped the suds from his bushy beard and stared down at the campfire for a couple of seconds. I could tell that he knew exactly what I meant. He then chuckled and rocked in his chair with a smug grin. "Zach, I tell ya, you don't know creepy until you've spent some time out here." He then began to tell me a story of when he had first began living out there. He said it took him close to a year to finally assemble his cabin, at least partially. During that time, he and his dogs were living in a simple tent. Mark said that a couple weeks after living there, he started noticing something odd. Every once in a while, he would awake to find mutilated animals just outside the perimeter of his camp. Usually it was just small creatures like rabbits, birds, and squirrels, but it didn't stay that way. Over time, Mark began finding more and more corpses left at his camp. He thought that it was the work of a puma at first, despite the fact that the corpses seemed to retain most of the meat. He quickly rethought that though when he found an actual puma corpse one morning. He said that most of the animals had slash marks along their sides and necks, and many had been disemboweled. He began thinking that it was the work of some deranged person, but even that thought didn't last long. One night, as he was preparing to turn in for the evening, he heard a rustling sound coming from within the forest. He ducked down underneath some timber in hopes of catching a glimpse of the culprit. Both of his dogs were already chained up for the night, so he knew it couldn't be one of them. A figure then emerged deeper in the woods. Mark said that he didn't see the entire thing, but he could tell that it was bipedal and scrawny. I asked if it could have been a bear with mange, but Mark claimed it was way too skinny for that. He said that he had seen sick bears before and they looked and moved nothing like that thing. Mark initially planned on trying to shoot it, but after seeing that, he admitted he didn't think that it would have been a good idea. The creature dropped something on the perimeter, which Mark discovered the following morning was the corpse of a raccoon. The thing's head then tilted and appeared to stare directly towards Mark. They just stared there in silence for several seconds, until the dogs began snarling voraciously from inside the tent. They must have caught its scent, and the thing suddenly crouched onto all fours and dashed off back into the woods as the dogs went ballistic. Mark didn't know what he had seen that night and apparently never saw it again. To me, it sounded like a Wendigo or a skinwalker based on his description. I told him that, but he had no idea what those things were. He seemed to think the thing was actually leaving him gifts, but I wasn't so sure about that. I asked him about the typical creatures as seen in creepypasta and television lore. I mentioned the Wendigo, Skinwalkers, Slenderman, the Rake, Siren Head, and some of the well-known others, but Mark didn't seem to know anything about any of them. He did, however, know about something that he called the Whistler. Apparently, ever since he had been out there, he heard an odd whistling sound on occasion. It started off as little more than a dull, barely audible noise in the distance. He said at times it would come closer, and at others it seemed like it was further away. Mark thought it was a bird for the longest time, but one night he found the truth. He was chopping wood when suddenly the whistling noise had emerged. This time it was different, and this time it was closer than ever before. Suddenly, there was a rustling noise from behind him. Mark spun back, but only saw a few branches bristling back and forth. He then heard the whistle again, louder than ever before. He looked up and there it was. About 20 feet up in a large oak tree was some kind of figure. Mark described it as a kind of human with a head that looked like some kind of messed up eel. He said he saw the thing stare down at him with beady black eyes. He just froze, and before he could do anything, the thing suddenly leapt from the tree. It crashed into another one further away, and it continued whistling and crashing as it blended into the depths of the woods. I didn't know what to say to that. I have heard legends about the whistlers out in the woods, but never heard about anyone having actually seen them. The way that he described it sounded quite creative, and I wondered whether he was capable of an imagination so elaborate, or if he had actually seen what he had claimed. I asked him whether he thought this whistler was the same creature that was leaving him corpses, but he just shook his head. Without being prompted, he told me another tale about hearing voices in the woods sometimes. Sometimes it was that of an old man, sometimes that of a young girl, and sometimes it didn't sound human at all. I wondered whether my new friend was perhaps schizophrenic or suffering from some mental illness that caused him to hear these things. I obviously didn't tell him that, but his claims had to be met with some amount of skepticism. What do you think it was? Mark leaned back and his head swiveled on his shoulders. No clue, son, and part of me hopes that I never find out. He went on to explain that he had continued hearing voices on occasion, but never saw who or what was making them. He seemed to think all the voices were coming from the same entity, though. Without being prompted, he took the conversation in an entirely new accusatory direction. It's that government, Zach, messing with things they got no business messing with. He then delved into a conspiratorial rant about how the government, and specifically the guys in black trucks, that were up to some really shady antics. He said they knew about the gates in the forest and had been actively trying to open them. He didn't elaborate on what exactly he meant by that. You see them out there. You know, the government, CIA. Mark looked confused. CIA? He asked. It was my turn to look confused then. Yeah, the Central Intelligence Agency. You know, the Men in Black, MK Ultra, all that and whatnot. Mark still appeared slightly puzzled. I didn't understand how a guy like him who hated the government to such an extreme degree had apparently never heard of the mother of all conspiracy agencies, like the CIA. He then seemed to have an epiphany and his eyes lit up in recognition. Oh, yeah, I forgot all about them. He then laughed and shook his head as he downed another swig of ale. My memory ain't what it used to be, I'm afraid. Man, how could I forget about them? Well, in my defense, they don't carry no badges out here, and their vehicles don't exactly advertise who they work for. He paused and rubbed the back of his neck. But you've seen them out here. Mark met my eyes and nodded. Oh yeah. Mark told me that one time he had been tracking elk through the woods in late autumn. He had followed the trail for a few miles when he suddenly heard a noise coming from a grove up ahead. It sounded nothing like a bear though, and more like several people arguing. Mark crept forward slowly, taking care as to not disturb the foliage and remain out of sight. After a couple of seconds, he saw the outline of several people emerge in the grove. One man was on his knees in the center, while 4 men in black suits surrounded him. The man on his knees had open wounds and bruises upon his face, and his clothing was torn and tattered. He was begging the others for mercy, but they didn't appear to be the forgiving type. 2 of the men were speaking quietly to one another, while the other 2 stood watch over their apparent captive. The man on his knees was dressed in white, with Mark describing his clothes as looking like a surgeon's uniform, or maybe the attire of someone from an insane asylum. He listened but couldn't make out what the 2 other men were talking about, but they were clearly arguing. The man on his knees appeared to be weeping softly. Mark said he didn't know what to do, and before he could do anything, one of the 2 men who had previously been arguing had stepped away. Without a word, the man stepped behind the captive, lifted a pistol to the back of the man in white's head, and pulled the trigger. Mark described seeing a splash of red, but said the weapon made a lot less noise than he thought it would. The man in white went limp and fell face first into the dirt. "My God," I said, mouth falling agape as Mark had concluded his story. I eyed him closely, but I didn't see any aura of boasting in his eyes. They didn't twinkle like that of a man who tried telling a fabricated story to simply amaze or impress an audience. He didn't meet my gaze at all, as a matter of fact. He just put his hands in front of his mouth and stared into the campfire with a somber gaze. It was clear to me that he was either an accomplished actor or what he had witnessed truly haunted him. "That poor boy couldn't have been much older than you. I wish I would have done something, but I just ran." He shook his head, and his eyes seemed to glaze over. I just stayed quiet, as there was nothing that I could think to say. After a couple of moments of lingering silence, Mark finally spoke again. "Zach, I gotta tell you a secret." He looked me in the eye and I gulped down the lump in my throat. "I don't particularly care for the government." I chuckled and Mark let out a small laugh. "Yeah, I think you've mentioned that once or twice," I replied with a laugh. "Yeah, suppose I have. But it's not because the IRS is after me. It's because of things like what I saw that day. It's because the government corrupts by its very nature. Takes what it wants and destroys those who oppose it. Ain't no justice, no considerations, and nothing you can do about it." Now, I don't know the details of what they were discussing on that night, but I guarantee you that boy didn't deserve what he got. I nodded, but wasn't entirely convinced that he witnessed what he thought he had. "You sure it was the government that did that? Could have been drug dealers or the mafia." Mark hunched his shoulders and gave a snide chuckle. "Oh, what's the difference?" I chuckled but didn't have a response. "Well, I see why you would think that, but that's because you ain't spent as much time out here as I have. But what you don't know and what no one is supposed to know, it's about the tunnels." I peeked an eyebrow at that comment. "Tunnels?" Mark grinned and nodded back. "There's a series of tunnels that run deep below the earth. Gotta be a couple dozen of them within a few miles of us now. Government knows about them. Maybe they build them, but, well, I doubt that. I think they're just interested by what's inside. And that is, I asked, now on the edge of my seat. Mark scoffed and shook his head. I got no idea, but it's gotta be something bad. I was a bit disappointed with that answer, but Mark immediately drew my curiosity back. You want to see one of them? I nodded without even really thinking. Mark grinned. I figured you might. It's a bit late in the day to go now, so what do you say we head out there first thing in the morning? I agreed without hesitance, and promised to return the next morning to meet up with Mark. I walked back down the trail that day with my imagination running wild. As I mentioned, I liked Mark and very much enjoyed our conversations. To me, he was somewhat like a compassionate grandfather, with a plethora of exuberant stories that may or may not have been slightly exaggerated. I thought about all that he had told me, about the animal carcasses, the whistling thing, the voices, and the tunnels. I wanted to believe him, but urban legends are abound in our day and age. I was well aware that perhaps he had just concocted these stories after his decades of isolation. I needed to see some proof for myself. Dew glistened on the leaves illuminated by the crimson sun rising over the hills as I set off the next morning. It was a bit chilly as I walked, but thoughts of the unknown kept me warm as I walked by. Before long, I arrived at Mark and I's usual meeting spot, and I found him already waiting there for me. He greeted me, and without hesitation, we began to trek out to his spot. We made small talk on the way, mostly about asinine topics like my family and work. After maybe 15 minutes of walking, we rounded a small bend tucked behind a small grove of trees. Mark stepped out in front and turned to face me. He then grinned and outstretched his hand to the right. I followed his gesture and felt my jaw strike the floor. There was an opening in the side of the hill that was lined with smooth stone and bricks. It was quite enormous, with the perimeter having to have been at least 15 feet wide. The opening appeared collapsed and the entrance was filled with rubble and dirt, looking as though somebody had intentionally yet clumsily sealed it. "This is the tunnel?" I asked. Mark nodded. "One of many, but it wasn't sealed up like this last time I was here." "How long ago was that?" Mark shrugged. "I don't know, maybe a year or two." I looked back at the collapsed tunnel. It was clear that someone had gone through a great deal of effort to construct it, but the construction didn't look like a mining operation. I'm no expert in mining or anything, but I can't imagine that they would spend time laying brick and creating such a wide entrance. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but the more curious fact was why it had been sealed up. I thought maybe it was just vandals, but that explanation somehow didn't satisfy. "What's inside?" I asked. Mark paused for a moment and stared towards the wreckage. He then shook his head and spat into the dirt. "Bad things." I hoped that he would elaborate on it, but he didn't. "I mean, it would have to be for someone to seal it up like this, right? That's an impressive hole that would have taken a great deal of effort." He was right about that, but I still felt there was information that he was withholding from me. "You think this is the government's work?" Mark nodded. "Not a single doubt in my mind about it." Mark's head then suddenly flicked to the side and he stared out into the trees as if something had alerted him. I watched the color drain from his cheeks as his mouth pursed open. "We should go. I don't like lingering here for too long." I didn't argue, as clearly something had spooked him. He and I trekked back to his cabin, checking his snares on the way back. Mark found a pair of rabbits in his traps, and after swiftly snapping their necks, He slung them over his shoulder. We got back to his cabin and Mark set to work on harvesting the meat from the rabbits for his stew. I sat around petting Daisy and Rally as they slobbered all over my knee and panted endlessly. I don't think I've ever told you about the scariest part of living out here, did I? Mark asked. I looked up from the two dogs and I stared at him, heart now beating with excitement. Mark sauntered over, carrying the meat of the rabbits along with a clump of chopped vegetables. He dumped the plate into the simmering cauldron on the fire, and then took a seat across the fire. I stayed silent as he stared down at the flickering flames in deep thought. There are things out there that people don't know about. Creatures, places, and things that seem to defy all explanation. The advancement of society and technology has led people to believe that they're safe. And for the most part, they're right. So long as they stay out of the woods, those things can't get them. But there's something that can. Mark paused and looked me dead in the eye. I call it the silence. He paused as if to allow the words to accumulate the dread that he felt they deserved. I had an inkling of an idea where the conversation was headed, but I just waited for him to explain. There's been rumors about it for a very long time, and it's something that has been affecting humanity for centuries, if not millennia. People have only just begun to realize it, but if they knew the true extent of what's going on, well, no one would ever go into the woods again. He paused and leaned in to stir the pot a bit before sitting back. People disappear, Zach. No reason for it, no explanation, and no bodies are ever found. The cases seem to defy all explanation, and it happens again and again. Mark then suddenly grunted and began rubbing his eye. That smoke. Sorry, where was I? The disappearances, I replied. Mark seemed suddenly hesitant, as if he didn't know whether he should continue. Yes, the disappearances. I don't like talking about this if I'm being honest. It's not really my business, but you're a good kid, Zach, and I know you come here a lot, and I'd be devastated if anything were to happen to you. Dread crept around me like dozens of little spiders scurrying at my flesh. I couldn't help but raise my guard and wonder where exactly this conversation was headed. Mark went on to tell me about this silence that he mentioned. He said that if I was ever walking through the woods and everything went completely silent, I was to drop to my knees and put my face in the dirt immediately. He said to stay that way until sounds returned to normal. And what if the sound doesn't come back? I asked, spine tingling with anxiety. Mark looked me dead in the eye and his words offered nothing of comfort. Well, then God help you. He said no more about the subject, and I didn't push him on it. It was clear that he wasn't really comfortable discussing it beyond his initial warning. If he had had any theories about what was responsible, he didn't voice them. The whole conversation had given me strong missing 411 vibes, and I wondered whether he was referring to the same phenomenon. Both of us just sort of lingered in silence for a while as the stew finished cooking. A few minutes later, Mark leaned in and scooped 2 servings into bowls, handing one of them to me. The stew was delicious as usual, and I happily scarfed it down as Mark provided his hounds with their dinner as well, although didn't so much as nibble on his own serving. What do you know about mimics? I don't know why exactly I asked, but the thought had suddenly arisen in my mind. Mark seemed to perk up, but yet stared back with a look of confusion that seemed to contradict his reaction. I'm sorry, what? Mimics, I clarified. Some people call them imposters or liars, things that look and try to act human but aren't. Mark stared back at me and a small grin slithered onto his face. Now, what would make you ask a question like that? Mark's grin evaporated and he stared back with something akin to contempt. Truth is, some of the things I've seen from him made me question who he claimed he was. There was just a subtle wrongness to him in a way that I've never felt the words to accurately describe. Just curious, I replied, staring back. Mark chuckled, but without any humor in his tone. Your kind always is. Ever since your brothers took up arms against one another in the War of Gray and Blue, your curiosity has been quite insatiable. You think this land belongs to you, like this country is your own personal proving grounds to pillage and destroy as you please. His form seemed to shift as he spoke, his eyes shrinking in their sockets and his skin seemed to twitch. His teeth bared like the fangs of a cougar, and his long black hair flowing like a clump of wild eels. He leaned forward in a gaze that no longer seemed entirely human. Zach, there are things out here that your world of science and logic will never understand, and these things are better left alone. He and I just stared at one another, and I felt my heart beginning to thump away in my chest. I thought about his words, the War of Gray and Blue. Could he have been referring to the American Civil War? Why reference that event specifically? What year did you say you moved out here? I asked. Mark grinned again, now appearing more menacing than ever before. 1896. I shook my head. I don't understand, I replied, shaking my head. Your kind never does. His voice had suddenly changed to becoming much more high-pitched, like that of a young girl. His head cocked to the side and his grin grew almost literally ear to ear, as his mouth stretched impossibly wide. Your kind has conquered this world, both beast and nature bow at your might. You live in comfort, convinced that there's nothing that can hurt you anymore. His voice had changed again, sounding like a raspy Scottishman. But you're wrong. His voice had changed again, like that of a young rebellious boy resisting his parents' wishes in a juvenile defiance. Mark then stood and his form extended, making him tower over me in the campsite. Even Daisy and Raleigh started altering their form, like they were also simply hiding it from me. I rose and backed away, no longer seeing Mark as the friendly hermit that I had thought him to be. I thought that that moment would be my end, and that the beast which hid itself in the form of Mark was prepared to devour me whole. Before he did, I had one final question that I had to ask. What are you? Mark chuckled, his form continuing to grow abhorrently inhuman. He then shook his monstrous head. Wrong question. His words bellowed forth, spoken in the chorus of 1,000 voices all in unison. I took another step back, wondering what it could have meant by that. It then struck me. What do you want? The thing that I had once known as Mark stared down at me with an entirely inhuman gaze. To watch and protect. We stared at one another and I attempted to understand what was happening. After all he had told me and his time devoted to actually speaking with me, part of me also wanted to believe his words were meant to reassure me. Like he was conveying that it was me, or more generally humanity as a whole, that he wished to protect. After ruminating on it for a while though, I don't think that's the case anymore. Why are you telling me all this? The thing that I had once known as Mark grinned, as if that was the question he was waiting to hear. So that you can tell the world. And so I have. I left Mark and that trail behind and I haven't been back since. That's why I'm here now, to tell the world as the thing I once knew as Mark instructed me to. I don't even know why or what exactly I'm supposed to be telling. Maybe that Mark is not human and that there are things in the woods that will never be fully understood. Or maybe that he's watching, and something has given him a great deal of power for some reason. I wish I had more answers, but I had to share this, regardless of whether anybody will believe it. And needless to say, I don't think I'll be visiting Mark again anytime soon. An elevator stands alone in the depths of the woods. The sound of its low, electric hum grows steadily louder. It's subtle at first, but it rises to join the soft crunches of the sticks and ferns beneath our feet. The tiny, fine hairs on the back of my neck raise up in response. There are no birds now, no insects, just the crunch and that soft, steady hum. The elevator stands as a steel obelisk in the center of a small clearing. Pine needles litter the ground. They are illuminated in faint blue and neon green from the elevator's two small lights in the darkness. There are no buildings anywhere near here, nothing urban or man-made, just endless dark forest, leaves, pine, and this elevator. The doors are closed and there's a single shiny silver button embedded into the frame. I come to a stop, anxious, but trying not to show it. James and Maya stop too, though James steps the closest. Ever the bravest, ever the dumbest. He takes another step and then another, and places his hand on the elevator door. He turns around to grin at us, the side of his face illuminated in the green glow. "It's warm," he says quietly, his grin widening. "Are you guys ready?" Are we ready? What seemed like a great idea in the middle of the afternoon now seems foolish and dangerous. Hell, scary too. I'll admit it. I glance over to Maya. I'm not going to be the one to suggest that we chicken out, but if she brings it up, well, then I'll back her. I silently hope that she says something, but she does not. She only shifts silently from foot to foot, and James takes our silence as a response. He turns back to the elevator and presses the button. For a moment, nothing happens. I realize that I'm holding my breath and we wait, and we listen. A soft whirring joins the rumble beneath the ground. An LED X appears above the elevator's doors on a dusty screen, and then it quickly changes into a -4, and then -3, -2, -1, and 0. With a soft ding, the elevator doors slide open, revealing a pretty standard inner compartment inside. We look back into our own faces in the mirror that covers the elevator's back wall. Behind us is the illusion of the eternal forest. James claps his hands and breaks the tension. "Okay, ladies, here we go. We going down." "James," Maya murmurs, "I don't know about this. This thing could go anywhere." He sighs. "Oh, don't go back on me now, girl. It's okay, we'll all be together. We'll just go down, check it out, take some pictures. Maybe a video for YouTube." Maya says nothing and James turns to me. "Indy, come on, set her straight." "I'm down, James, obviously, but we should for sure all stick together. I'm not leaving Maya behind if she wants to stay." James rolls his eyes. He presses the button again to prevent the elevator doors from closing. Waiting for us to make a move and seeing that we aren't, he takes it upon himself to stride right into the elevator compartment and then turns to face us, folding his arms. "Let's go already," he says, beckoning us in. I take a step towards him and my foot crunches in the leaves. "James, just wait for a second." But he only grins. The door slides shut and he vanishes from sight. I jump forward and repeatedly press the elevator button to try and reopen the doors, but I'm too late. "For God's sake, man," I mutter angrily. looking up to the LED display above the doors. They flicker and change from 0 to -1, slowly through to -2, where the display then blinks and cuts out. "Indy, what do we do?" Maya asks me as I reach into my pocket for my phone. Straight away, I try to call James' number, but he declines it. That boy. I fume quietly in the glow of the elevator, thinking, alright, while he obviously wants us to follow him down, let's just wait for him to come back up. He'll get bored without the attention. Sure, Maya says. Yeah, that's a good idea. So that's what we do. Not very exciting, but we just wait in the darkness, checking our phones, trying to send text messages. But 5 minutes pass, and then 10, and then 20, and then 30. Maya stirs. This isn't working, is it? He's not going to come back up. Hell, what if he's in trouble? I bite my lip. She's giving voice to my own thoughts. We're going to have to go down, aren't we? Yeah, she replies. Dang it. I pocket my phone and brush my hair back from my face. Alright, then let's get it over with. And be prepared for him to do something stupid like jump out at us. I reach forward and I press my finger against the button. Now that I actually have time to think, I realize that James was right. It does feel kind of warm. The whirring beneath the ground resumes, and I feel the subtle buzzing and a murmuring through my body as I wait for the doors to open. The LED at the top of the elevator reappears. It changes through the numbers until it reaches 0, and with that same soft ding, the elevator doors slide steadily open, and we once again look back into our own faces in the mirror's reflection, with the endless shadows of the forest leading away behind. Well, here we go then, I mutter in a voice that fails to project. I step forward first and Maya follows, and together we head inside the compartment. Which floor did James go down to? There's a pause. I don't know, it wasn't the first one. Was it -2 or lower? Damn it, I don't remember either. Well, try -2 first then. My heart has begun to pound, but I do my best to ignore its beating as I reach to the buttons on the wall to my left. I tap the -2 and the doors draw slowly shut with a soft hiss. For a moment, there is nothing. I can feel Maya's nervous energy right beside me, and then we both jump as the elevator jolts and begins its descent, the whirring sound coming from all around us now. Down we go. Down to -1. It's clear that the elevator has significantly picked up speed, but we're not dropping through levels as quickly as I had thought we would. How deep down are we going exactly? I look around me. There's not much going on in this compartment. There's the mirror, the shiny chrome walls and doors, the buttons, and a little compartment beside them. I peer closer to read the small text written on the grid's label. Do not open or engage prior to adequate shutdown. Risk of fire. Max weight 2,000 pounds. The elevator drops down to -2. It whirs and grinds as it draws to a halt, and I hold my breath as I wait for the doors to open up. There's the hiss, and the world beyond the doors reveals itself. It takes my eyes a moment to adjust. The hall before us is vast and long, wide with high-up, heavy pipeline ceilings, and clinical if rather dank-stained walls that lead away through shadow and beneath the dim glow of gently humming fluorescent lights. They look old and some are cracked and flickering. Some of the beams don't seem to work at all. Whoa, Maya murmurs. This is spooky as hell. James, I hiss, leaning out from the elevator doors and into the darkness. Are you out there? But there is no reply. I sigh and bring my hands up to my chin, and then I set out into the hall looking back at Maya. Come on, let's go and find him. She says nothing but pales as she steps out from the elevator to join me. Once she's done this, the doors were quietly closed. I shiver, but I set off into the hall, tensed and waiting for James to jump out at us at any moment. I hope that he will, to tell the truth. Then we can laugh and put this behind us and just get the hell out. But James does not appear. "What the hell is this place, Indy?" Maya asked me. "Some kind of bunker, you think?" "I don't know," I reply as I cast my eye down long off-shooting corridors leading away into the shadows, and marked with long strips of crisscrossing tape. "Condemned," they read. "Do not enter." There are plenty of old wooden boxes stacked up against the walls, and areas of the surrounding space lit to have been sealed away with metal shutters, seemingly locked up tight. "James!" I call out again a little bit louder, trying to keep the fear from shaking my voice. His name echoes down and away into the gloom. And as I'm looking around, I catch sight of something moving, something up high against the ceiling. I recoil in sudden horror, my breath caught in my throat for a second as I stagger away from the movement, and Maya jumps in turn at my sudden motion. Something seems to be shivering up by the ceiling, roughly the size of, I don't know, a cat maybe, tucked up against the wall by a leaky pipe. "The hell is that?" I mutter, heart beating as Maya steps up to my side. I tap on the flashlight to my phone and raise it up to get a better look, and the light reveals a quietly pulsating, deathly-looking mass. A fungus, I guess, or a cluster of fungus, gray-green with specks of black. I watch it as it trembles for a second or two longer, and then it falls back into hesitant, waiting stillness. I squint and lean a little closer, not too close, mind you. I dread to think of the spores such a monstrosity might produce. I realize further that there are tiny twitching little worms that seem to be burrowing their way between the various bulbs and bulges of the cluster, although I'm not sure if they're worms at all, or just minute, quietly squirming little tendrils. I don't consider myself very squeamish, but I have to suppress a sudden gag and I take a step back. "Indy," Maya murmurs, and I turn to her. She's stepped a few feet away and is facing the opposite direction. "Do you see that thing?" I ask her. "I've never seen anything like it. There's probably more around here too." But Maya isn't even looking this way anymore. She stood beside what looks like an old power box, staring down at the ground beneath the flickering light. "What?" I ask her, walking over, but she puts out an arm to stop me from going too far. And I'm glad she did. Looking down at the ground past her feet makes my stomach drop. Behind the power box, the floor just gives away. It isn't immediately obvious due to the overlapping, flickering pattern of shadows, but the floor cracks away into an enormous hole, an entire missing section of flooring, and rusted old iron girders and broken grids are visible now. Down it goes, down past more dripping pipes and dead hanging cables, down into the void. I become aware of a subtle rumbling coming up from this gap in the floor, coming up from beneath. From the far down darkness, I catch a glimpse of another cluster of fungus too, attached in an arc around one of the pipes. I shiver and lift my head to face back down the corridor. "James!" I call out one quickly last time, before I can psych myself out. "James, we're heading back up. This isn't funny and we'll see you back on the surface." But as ever, there is no response. I grab Maya's hand and turn back the way we came, back to the elevator doors, and she does invite me. The doors, though, they're so far away and I can barely even still see them through the shadows. Did we really come so far? I could have sworn that we barely walked more than a few dozen feet down the hall, but no, they're a long way away. I increase my pace and Maya does likewise. I cast a quick look behind me at the fungus up and against the ceiling, and to my dismay it looks like it has resumed its shivering in the shade. I start moving faster still, long strides, and my breathing quickens. The faint blue-green lights of the elevator doors become visible, and we break into a run. Side by side, we tear down the hall, one of my shoes landing squarely on a piece of strewn, ooze-marked paper, and it's sent up into the air as I race towards the doors. I can't even tell you why I'm running in truth. I just feel it in my gut that something is terribly wrong and that we need to get out. The doors approach closer and closer, and we stumble to a chaotic halt as my finger is slammed up against the button, again and then again. We hear the thing whirring into motion behind the doors, and I cast a fearful look back over my shoulder and down into the hungry darkness of the hallway. Come on, I mutter, until at last the doors grind steadily open and we jump right inside. Back to the surface, Maya asks. Yeah, let's go back to the top and just think about what to do, I reply, thumbing the button for 0, and the doors draw dutifully closed. For a moment there is silence, and then it begins its ascent. Up, through the underground layers. I watch, blood pumping, as the LED display finally changes from -2 to -1. But here, the elevator quickly decelerates. What's happening? Maya hisses, and then, with a hiss of its own, the elevator comes to a stop and the doors draw open, unbidden at level -1. As the doors part, we find ourselves staring back at ourselves. There is only a wall between the elevator doors here, a giant glass mirror. And there we are, staring into our own faces. The mirror before us reflects the mirror behind us and creates the illusion of a dark and never-ending tunnel, leading away in both directions. A dark tunnel with Maya and I at the center. And we stand in terrified silence, and the lights cut out. There is only the sound of our ragged breathing for a long, long moment, and when the lights flicker back into life, there is somebody else in the mirror, somebody standing just behind us. A young woman staring back at us from the glass with lidless eyes, her skin deathly white, translucent even, and is peeled away completely from around her wide and bloodshot eyes. Please, she whispers, and Maya screams in alarm. She screams and panics and attacks the buttons on the side of the elevator in a frenzy, but I cannot move. I never would have thought that I would react like this, but here I am, stock still and frozen in place, unable to tear my gaze from the gaze of the woman in the mirror. She disappears from view as the elevator doors hiss closed, and motion resumes as we find ourselves once again going down. Down, 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 back down to the depths of the complex below. The elevator descends down through the complex. The motion is quick, but the LED's transition from -1 to -2 is slow. I finally gather enough inner strength to move and turn to look at the spot behind me, where the spectral woman had appeared. But she isn't there now. There's only Maya and myself. I become aware that Maya is still screaming. I shoot my eyes back up to the LED. We're still descending. -2 flickers away and is gradually replaced by a -3. The elevator decelerates and then finally it stops entirely. There's a soft ding and a hiss, and the doors part. Jesus, comes a voice from the gloom, and Maya is startled out of her panic. She looks like she's going to pass out. The voice is James. James, I manage breathlessly, stepping out from the elevator on shaking legs towards him, equal parts relief and frustration. You idiot, what the hell are you playing at? Oh, hey, wait, he says suddenly, jumping past me and putting his hand on the elevator door, preventing it from closing. The doors jam and clank and he breathes a sigh of his own relief. Sorry guys, he says apologetically. I came down here to try and scare you, but the buttons don't work on this floor. So the doors closed shut behind me and I couldn't get them to open again. He chuckles. I was freaking out for a while, I'm not gonna lie. You girls took your damn time. I smack him on the arm. Ow, he says. Hey. Stupid asshole. Never do anything like that again. Alright, geez. He looks over to Maya. Maya, you okay? Maya only stares ahead, shaking. She does, however, pull the boy into a hug, which surprises him. Okay, he says. Let's just get out of here, shall we? I don't think that we can, I reply. The elevator doors try to shut again, but James's hand keeps them in place. Don't think we can. No, I reply. James, there's something messed up going on down here. I don't know what exactly, but I think we might need to look for another way out. Maya and I tried getting back to the surface and well, I explained the ghostly woman. The woman with the skin and flesh peeled away from her eyes. The woman who only appeared in the mirror on level -1, and how the elevator wouldn't take us up any higher. James laughs nervously. What the hell? He looks back to Maya and he sees the truth in her face. She was right there, Maya says quietly. Right there behind us. So she was what? You're telling me that you saw a ghost. I don't know what we saw. I think she was only in the mirror, a trick maybe, an illusion or something clever, like a hologram, I guess. But she looked real enough. We both saw her, and the elevator didn't go back to the surface. I hold out my palm and I look down at my hand as James considers this. My fingers are still trembling. Maya is convinced the girl was a genuine ghost, a spirit of some kind, and she starts babbling to James as I turn and take in our new surroundings properly for the first time. Where floor -2 was a wide and abandoned hall, a warehouse of sorts, this level is far higher tech. The lights seem more reliable down here, though there aren't as many of them. They glow and hum softly in faint shades of teal and turquoise, and they cast the desks and panes of aesthetic wall-like glass all around us in an eerie, watery light. There are computers down here too, desk chairs, some tipped onto their sides, cabinets, and further down the corridor is what looks like some kind of water feature, though the water no longer runs. Many of the desks still boast subtle blinking lights in orange and yellow. Okay, James says after a minute of thought. Okay, if you're saying that we can't get back up via the elevator, then we'll just have to find another way out, right? Right, I reply, and he gestures for me to hold the elevator doors. I do so as he walks over to a nearby desk, grabbing 2 of the chairs and dragging them over, wedging them into the elevator to prevent the doors from closing. Is that going to be enough? I ask, and after a moment of hesitation, he decides to drag over an entire desk too, grunting with the exertion. Just in case, he says as he catches his breath. But satisfied that the doors are now not going to shut on us, we set out as a trio into the shadows. So, I say, did you do any exploring down here while you were stuck? Yeah, James replies. I didn't find any stairs or anything, but there's a load of more corridors this way. It all seems interconnected, like there's no doors or anything, just walls and glass and cables and shit. Do any of the computers work? I couldn't get any of the screens to load. Oh, but hey, check this out. He takes a slight detour and pushes past some strewn around office chairs and points at one of the computers. Not the monitor, but the actual boxy computer itself. Check it. I look and then recoil. It's that same fungus again. There is a tipped over, presumably split coffee mug on the top of the computer, and it has now been bound to the machine with a series of throbbing, green and gray oozing masses and thin crawling tendrils. The grids and panel of the computer are bulged, warped and cracked where the fungus has clearly expanded from the inside. Black ooze leaks down the side from the fans and over the desk. I think it's black at least. It's hard to tell the color in this light. That's revolting, Maya murmurs. It's the same as the fungus upstairs. I say to both of them, this stuff is dangerous. Look and see how it reacts to the sound, to our voices. It's moving. It's certainly pulsating now at least, throbbing more violently. Come on, we shouldn't be so close to it. No, it's not gonna hurt us, James remarks. But after a moment of hesitation, he does as I say, and we continue on along our way. It might, James, says Maya. You know, spores and stuff. To this, James says nothing. We walk for quite a long time, 20 minutes or so, passing near identical rooms with occasional control panels. We see dead screens and quietly blinking computers. Glass containers, some intact, some cracked and smashed. Some of these containers contain samples of the fungus. We discuss what we've seen as we make our way through the darkness, primarily the ghost in the mirror. So if she was real, if, I say, then what was she? What do we think? She's a ghost, Maya says with certainty. She was more than a projection. I could feel her. I could feel her presence in the elevator. She was cold and sick. You guys swear that you're not just messing with me, right? Like for real? James asks again, but he is met only with grim silence, and he does not ask for a third time. What the hell happened down here? I wonder aloud. This place is just so deserted. Like everybody tried to leave in a hurry. And what's the deal with this layout? No doors, says Maya. No signs. No damned emergency exit signs and no stairs. James grunts, kicking over a chair in frustration. Hey, chill out. But I forget. James was down here far longer than we were. He's already spent an hour or more of his night looking for an exit before we even showed up. Where's the way out? He barks and then louder. Hello, is anybody there? James, Maya hisses, pushing him. Be quiet. Why? He responds. And Maya doesn't have to answer for him. She only shrugs and looks away. I get why she said it though. The loudness of his voice makes me cringe in a place as quiet and slumbering as this. But I can't put into words why that is exactly. Hello? James shouts again, throwing out his arms, but there is no response. His voice echoes away into the turquoise gloom, and he rubs a hand across his forehead. With a sigh, he slumps down into the nearest seat and stares off into space. I'm sorry, guys, he says quietly. This was a mistake. I shouldn't have come down here. It's all right, Maya murmurs. Come on, I say. Let's just get this done. Let's try one of these corridors. But we've been walking in basically a straight line. If we go off course, how are we going to find our way back? Asks Maya. Look, let's just make something we'll recognize. Here, help me stack these chairs together. We push a small group of chairs into a pile, a shape that we'll be able to see and find and try heading off down a new route. At first, there are only more endless open space halls full of desks, computers, and occasional glass boxes, but the boxes become more numerous as we head through, until past a section of standalone plexiglass frosted wall, we find ourselves surrounded by them. Many of the boxes are filled with water and lit from beneath, and the colors of these lights are washed against the nearby walls. James looks around and his face is cast in a watery blue and deep green. Maya shivers despite the fact that it's warmer in here than the complex as a whole, and her eyes reflect the dim purple glow from a nearby tank. The warmth, I think aloud. The lights, the elevator. There's something still powering all of this stuff. Some backup generators or something. I look up overhead to see a red bulb blinking clear and fast. It sends out brief, regular flashes across the pipes and metalwork above our heads. An LED image of a basic stickman running through a door is also illuminated. That kind of looks like an exit sign. Is there a way out around here? We split up a bit. Not too much, don't worry, still within shouting distance. And we explore around these curious glass tanks. Most are empty of everything but water, but on some of the glass it has become clouded and blocked by gunge and dark murk. I creep between two long tanks and peer through an open doorway, leading into a long hallway beyond. The ceiling is high in here and there are platforms attached to the wall, vantage points for walking across and looking down to the hall floor below. The room is filled with watery tanks, and these ones are large, far larger than the fish tank-sized boxes in the previous corridors. "Guys," I call out, just above my regular speaking volume. "Guys, come and check this out." I hear their footsteps approach and they join me in the doorway, and together we head into the hall looking all around. Most of the tanks are illuminated in either red or blue, though a couple towards the far end appear to glow softly in purple. Our footsteps echo around the walls as we walk, and I look up into the nearest blue tank. "It's that fungus," I mutter to the guys. "You see, it's in the water." I struggle with a rise of revulsion as I see the fungus quiver in the liquid, attached to the corner of the tank at about head height and the size of a basketball. Its tendrils drift lazily in the water and a bubble escapes from its side. I watch with disgust as the bubble rises up to the surface and it disappears. "There's some in this one too," says Maya, and I turn to look. She is washed in the tank's blue light, and beyond her in the water is another example of the fungus. This one is longer and larger, and it covers almost an entire wall with its growth. James is a little further ahead. He stands in the red glow of the tank before him and stares up into its water. "James, you good?" I ask, but he does not reply. He does not turn, and a chill ripples up and across my back. My mouth goes deathly dry and I try again. "James?" No response. Cautiously, I walk over to him, though my movements have become sluggish and slow. I turn my head to look in the tank. In the center, softly bubbling, is a bloated mass that throbs and twitches. Long, thick tendrils connected to the walls of the tank, and in its very center is an eye. An active, watching, disturbingly human eye. "The hell?" James whispers, and in response, the eye suddenly jolts, rolling sharply up to stare right into James' face, and the pupil shrinks. My stomach drops, and in the exact same second a noise reverberates from the corner of the hall, a thudding and the patter of general movement. I swing my head around and catch a glimpse of a red and purple washed shadow slithering around in the darkness, and for a second my voice catches in my throat. I am only able to grab onto Maya's sleeve, but as soon as I've drawn in a breath I say it. "Run." I don't need to shout. The message is clear. I start to drag Maya back through the complex as James's legs return to life, and together we make our escape. The energy suddenly frantic as we sprint and stagger back through the hall and into the preceding corridors. "Oh, screw this, I'm out," James shouts as we pushed past desks and blinking lights, knocking into the tower of chairs that we created and sending it tumbling with a clatter. "I can't take this anymore. I'm going up the elevator." "But James, the girl." "Oh, forget that. I would rather take some ghost than whatever the hell is down here." And he runs down the long corridor back to the elevator, and I sprint after him before I lose him behind the panels and walls. "James, wait up." But he doesn't. He runs and runs until at last all three of us are stumbling and panting, exhausted at the doors, but still he doesn't stop. He tears away the chairs, and with a grunt he draws back the desk, freeing the door space and allowing the elevator to close. He steps inside, chest rising and falling and face flushed. His eyes dart over our shoulders. "Well, let's go." Maya looks like she's about to cry. "I can't leave you down here, so get in, come on." He urges, and reluctantly she does so, shaking. I grip my teeth and feel myself get dragged in. I turn to look through the doors and into the gloom as they steadily draw close with a soft hiss and a gentle ding. And my stomach lurches as the elevator begins to rise. Maya stands shaking in the corner, staring straight ahead. James swallows anxiously, still catching his breath. Maybe it won't happen this time. Maybe we'll be okay. The LED goes from -3 to -2. Up we go, ascending through the darkness, and my fear rises with it. I read the little line of text by the button compartment over and over to try and keep myself calm. Do not open or engage prior to adequate shutdown. Risk of fire, max weight 2,000 pounds. It'll be okay. I mutter out loud. It's gonna be alright. The LED rolls from -2 to -1, and it starts to slow. James looks down to the buttons to the left. Maya starts to panic. No, no, no. The elevator comes to a stop at -1. My blood chills and everything seems to suddenly drift in slow motion. The doors clank steadily open and we see ourselves in the mirror. The color drains from James's face and indeed from mine. There stand behind us two apparitions, the young woman from before and a man a little older. They both stare back at us in the glass. They shimmer as if not entirely there, and the skin is flaked and peeled away from their eyes, giving them terrifying, lidless expressions. "Please, no more," the man whispers. And quick as a flash, James slams the button for the elevator. "Up," he shouts. "Back to the surface." The doors close and we are plunged back into darkness. But the elevator does not go up. It refuses. So down we go. Down, down, down. Back down and into the depths. The elevator shudders through the darkness on its descent. Waves of narrow light washing over us as we drop down through the earth, until at last comes to a stop on level -4. The doors hiss and dutifully slide open, and we tumble out as a 3 and into the darkness. "Holy hell," James mutters, putting a hand on his head, and then throwing it out into the dark. "Jesus." "Yeah," I reply quietly, as Maya tries to stifle sobs just behind us. She wipes a sleeve across her eyes, and then we don't say anything for a while. We just process and look around. We appear to be in some sort of lobby, a transitional place, I guess. Not much feature to it. There's the water cooler and some chairs, and there's a vending machine in here too. There's not much left in it though. Upon closer inspection, I realize that the door has been cracked off its hinges. It looks like it could swing wide open. A corridor leads away just ahead and around a corner. It's warmer down here, more humid. "So you guys weren't screwing around then about that ghost?" James says eventually. "No," I reply. "Of course we weren't." "So we really are going to have to find another way out of here then. We have no choice." "Come on," I say to him, to both of them. "Are you ready? We should keep going." "Right," he replies. He reaches over and squeezes Maya's hand, a gesture that she seems to appreciate. "Let's keep going." We head through the little room and around the corner. I don't know what I was expecting to find down here on level -4, but it wasn't what I'm seeing now. The corridor opens up into a wide hallway. To the right is a collection of office spaces, empty meeting rooms, and whiteboards with glass walls. Not so many computers down here. The screens are fewer and built into walls well clear of the floor. The floor itself is tiled, all of it. Ahead and to the left of the office space is an enormous pool, and as with the level above, it's lit eerily in green. There are machines fixed into the pool's edges. I'm not sure what they are, though one looks like it could be a wave generator. I walk over to the water's edge, to the gentle lapping against the side. It's not entirely still. The pool goes pretty deep down. It's difficult to say due to its warped perception and grungy color of the water, but the pool walls round out into a cylinder and drop way down into the darkness. There are offshooting tunnels built into the pool's side, and I can see another such pool further into the complex and half hidden around a series of spiraling metal stairs. These stairs climb to a collection of interconnected viewing platforms up above our heads. This is the first part of the whole place that I've seen so far with actual doors. There are lots here in the walls, leading away to unknown rooms and through curious passages. "What is this place, guys?" James asks, shaking his head as a vent hisses somewhere away in the shadow. "What the hell is all this stuff?" "We shouldn't be down here," Maya says. "That's all I know for sure. Some old research laboratory, but it's so massive you would have thought we would have heard of it, or somebody would have known about it or something." I pause for thought. "Abandoned," James says. "Something happened here and they all got the heck out. Pretty damn quick too. They didn't even have time to shut off the lights or finish their coffees, so they got attacked by the ghosts maybe." Attacked by ghosts, I repeat, adjusting my sweater in the humidity and then deciding to take it off and wrap it around my waist. "No, that doesn't sound right." "They don't attack us anyway," Maya says. "They're only in the elevator, nowhere else." And James rubs his hands over his face. "Let's just keep going. We need out." So keep going we do. We walk around the edge of the pool as the green light shimmers on its surface. Our eyes readjust to the gloom. "Oh my God," I mutter, looking up into the corners of the room. Looking at the edges, at the pipes, at what I took originally for only shadows. "Guys, this place is filled with that fungus. Look, it's everywhere." And it really seems to be. Thick bulbous clusters of dark fungus spread and stretched out in the dampest, most humid crevices of the complex. It's probably just my imagination, but the air down here seems to become a great deal thicker. "Cover your mouths," I say to them, "just in case. Spores, you know." Maya has a mask in her back pocket and she puts it on. James and I have to make do with drawing the front of our shirts up over our noses and mouths. And so we walk, us three wanderers, through the wet and the gloom of this underground nightmare, a trio in the watery darkness. "We should climb up to the platforms up there," I say after a while, gesturing to the stairs. "It might give us a better view of where to go." "Sure," James replies, and we climb on up, our footsteps echoing with metallic clanks as we ascend. It doesn't go up very high, maybe 10 or so feet off the ground, but it does give us a better vantage point. We cross from one platform to another via a narrow metal bridge built between them. But after a moment or two, Maya comes to a sudden stop and James bumps right into her. "Maya, geez." I turn to look back at them and I see Maya staring intently down into the water of this pool directly below us. Guys, look." We do so, and I see immediately what she must have spotted. We aren't alone down here. There's something in the water. My heart pounds as I peer down, trying to make sense of what it is that I'm seeing. The shape in the water is human. At least it looks human. The thing is slithering through the water, and while its shape might be humanoid, its movements and motions are very much not. They're more snake-like or fish-like, and the more that I watch, the more I notice the things that are wrong. Very, very wrong indeed. The man, as it is a man, slithers and swims like a great fish. His legs, I see, have been, I don't know how to describe it, melted together almost. His limbs and joints are stuck and bound, wrapped by what appears to be a combination of melted flesh and that terrible dark fungus. Jesus. A long, low fin the color of the fungus is pushed up and out from his spine. I cannot see his face as he swims with his head down, but there are gill-like appendages writhing and slowly pulsating at the sides of his neck, a neck stuck to his torso with dark shivering strands. The abomination in the water approaches a corner of the pool and slithers around in a quick, sickening motion to change its direction. How does he know where to go? James whispers. He can't see where he's going. But he can, I realize. He can. From the top of his head, out from his scalp and peering through his hair are two faintly glowing eyes, pale yellow in the darkness, eyes where God knows there really shouldn't be. That thing in the water might once have been a human man, but it isn't anymore. His biology, the very structure of his being, has been warped into a monster beyond recognition, a creature slithering about in the depths. We watch in quiet terror as the thing slithers through the water, dropping down into the darkness until it is quickly lost from sight. The surface of the pool ripples softly and the filters whir dutifully on. We wait for a while in strained silence, waiting to see if the creature will resurface. Once we are as sure as we can be that it hasn't reemerged anywhere, we carry on, now painfully conscious of the sounds of our shoes against the thin metal of the stairs and the narrow platforms. What the hell was that? James mutters under his breath. That was a dude, right? What the hell happened to him? What's going on down here? You see that stuff that he was all gunked up with, I reply. It was that fungus, James, I'm sure of it. We need to get out. We really need to get the hell out of here already. How did it do that to him? Maya murmurs. How could it? I don't know, none of us do. But that grotesque image of the fungus bulging from within the computer on floor -2 returns to the forefront of my mind, and I shiver in revulsion. The platform comes to an end. Well, not quite an end as such, but they just keep going around and around the upper levels of these interlinked subterranean pool halls. We'll need to go down now if we want to make any progress. So down we go, moving carefully from step to step, and I can feel the group cringe as a whole when James accidentally slams his foot down hard onto the metal. Reverberations are sent out through the railings. It's fine, I find myself muttering. It's all fine, just keep moving. We reach the base of the stairs. The water from the pool here is leaked across the tiles and our shoes make little splashes as we cross. I look back over my shoulder again and again watching the surface of the water, looking for signs that the creature within is going to writhe up from the depths. But it does not yet at the least. We pass through an arc, illuminated in flickering blue, through another and another. One last pool only a few meters wide in circumference bubbles softly to our left. It's ringed with a railing. The machine attached to the water still works, but I have no idea what its purpose could possibly have been. We reach a door with a translucent window pane and push it open, revealing a lobby of sorts just behind it. There's a battered old humidity-damaged couch and a plant that has exploded beyond the confines of its pot. The thing has climbed up the side of the wall and has grown into the ceiling tiles and the lighting. Maya hurriedly closes the door behind us and releases what I presume to be a long-held breath. "So, it's the fungus," Maya says, stumbling over her words a little. You were right, Indy. You guys saw it right. The fungus bulging through that guy's skin." She pales as she says this. "There must be a way out around here," James says as he looks around, distracting himself from what he saw perhaps. A backroom set of stairs or a freight elevator, or hell, just something other than that elevator in the middle of the forest. There's an adjacent room here connected to the lobby. Lots of rooms actually, all leading into and through each other. The one right beside us has a thick glass screen that looks out into the damp and dingy pool hall, and the walls are covered in dead screens and random sketches. There's a large framed group photograph in here too, though humidity has curled and wrinkled its edges. The sketches are of the fungus. I hear rustling and I look over to see Maya flicking through a load that had been taped together. Drawings, diagrams, sketches of vivisections and fungal roots. There are other drawings too. Drawings and photographs tacked or taped alongside. Disturbing pictures of human faces. Human faces infected and diseased, with rotting skin around the eyes, peeling back and away from the skulls. There are pages upon pages of notes titled Treatment Hypothesis and Experiment Log, and other such titlings. My own eyes jump from picture to picture. There are sketches of animals here. Most are of fish, but there are lizards as well, bats and rats. And then there's the framed photograph, the large one hung in the center of the wall. It depicts around 36 people in lab coats and other similar gear, stood on a podium in a large well-lit hallway. The frame hangs beneath the plaque marked, "The Final Line of Defense," and in one of the middle rows, I see a familiar face. And amongst all the others, it's her. It's the face of the ghostly young woman that I saw in the mirror. She looks normal here. She's smiling. She doesn't look scary. She looks nice even. There's nothing wrong with her face or with her eyes. "Maya," I murmur, beckoning over my friend. "That's her, isn't it? That's the woman from the elevator mirror." Maya joins alongside and looks closely. "Yeah," she says. "Yeah, that's her." "And hey," James chimes in, pointing to the face of a man a row behind. "That's the guy, right? The ghost man that we all saw together. It's him, isn't it?" And sure enough, I think that James is right. That really looks like it could be him, a healthier, happier him. "So what does it mean?" I asked them. "Should we even try to find out? Will it help us get to the surface?" James puts his hand on his head. "For God's sake, so they want us down here, is that it? The ghosts of these people. They want to keep us down here to die, to join them. What the hell happened to them?" "The Final Line of Defense," I read out loud from the plaque, mulling the words over in my head. Something thumps and reverberates through the ceiling. The light flickers. I shoot a glance through the glass back towards the dark pool hall. I can see it again, the fish creature, a slithering shadow near the surface of the water. Those two faintly glowing eyes pale in the gloom. Ripples shimmer in and out across the pool as the monster swims. Without another word, James sets off through the rooms. Maya and I follow with one last look back. On we go past whiteboards covered in scrawlings, doodles of creatures, There are labels and notes and warnings. Reacts to sound. Begins with the eyes. Copies and pastes these qualities, modifying and adapting to suit the structure of its former host. Thorough remodeling, if left unchecked. They have sealed us away. We cannot get out. My heart hammers. With every subsequent room, the level of light seems to drop. The occasional green glow from a blinking, long-broken appliance is all that illuminates our way as we try to head further and further away from the pool hall. It doesn't feel like we're heading further away, though. The humidity and the warmth and the moisture in the air, it seems only to be increasing. "Indy?" Maya says from beside me. "I don't like this. I don't think that this is the way." "James," I call ahead. "James, this isn't helping." James has his face pressed against a window of dark glass. "It's just the same," he mutters. "More pools, and these ones are larger. I can't take much more of this." A layer of sweat glistens green in the light across his forehead, and he wipes it away. There's another thud from the ceiling, and then the sound of a gentle scraping and a scratching in the darkness. "It's okay," I say out loud, as the fear within the group rises. "We're okay." We've been conserving the batteries on our phones, but James taps his on now. The light hits the floor and illuminates a series of sketches. Like the others, once tacked to the wall but have now fallen and curled unceremoniously. Some are of people, some are of fish, and one picture depicts another creature, an annotated spider. And as the scraping sounds are matched by a subtle wet hiss, James lifts his flashlight up to the ceiling. The light lands on a warped monstrosity creeping its way towards us in the darkness. Terror strikes. The creature is the mutated combination of two human corpses, glued and merged and bound together by that vicious and terrible fungus. Cracked and twisted bodies into the shape of one enormous spider. The spider's 8 legs are the warped arms and legs of the two people, a man and a woman. And the woman I don't fail to realize is the young woman from the elevator. It's her from the picture, the first ghost. The spider has 2 fangs and each one distends from the mouth of one of the corpses. Saliva drips to the floor and pale yellow eyes glow all across the heads and necks of its hosts' bodies. Chaos takes hold, and within a scream, I watch as Maya hauls the top drawer from the nearest metal filing cabinet. The motion disturbs the spider, and with a sickening and skin-crawling speed, it scuttles across the ceiling to the opposite side of the room, being sure to keep us in its line of sight. Maya flings the drawer with all her strength at the glass, and it strikes with a thud and causes an impact crack right in the center. There are 2 more drawers. James grabs the middle one and sends its papers spilling out over the floor. As the spider dares to creep down the wall towards us, James hurls the drawer right at its head. It hits with a wet squelch, and with a hiss the spider retreats. The final drawer I grab myself, using it like a club in the spot that Maya damaged the glass until it smashes through entirely. We stumble through the gap. James cuts himself a little on his leg as he does so, and we scramble back out into the main pool hall, a different section to the one that we were in before. "Over there," James shouts, and we see a wide doorway in the side of one of the walls, tucked away into a corner. We head towards it, and I shoot a look back over my shoulder. One of the spider's legs emerges cautiously from behind the smashed glass. I catch a glimpse of cold, dead human fingers bound together with fungus as they grip carefully to the edge of the shattered glass. I turn away, back to look the way that I'm going. "James, why this way?" I call ahead. "This doorway is so much wider than the others. They must have needed a way to get all this stuff down here. He replies, though I can't tell if he's talking to me or to himself, as he takes us down a gloomy, fungus-lined corridor, ignoring the smaller doors and tight corners, opting instead for the wide and open doorless arches. "James!" "Surely," he mutters, red in the face from the exhaustion and the humidity. He leads us into the widest corridor so far. No tiles back here, just cold and emotionless concrete. There are a number of wooden boxes around, some small and some much larger. "Please," he murmurs, "please, please." And still we run down the length of this corridor and into the darkness, following the gentle glow of a tiny blinking green light. "Aha!" he shouts, the glee in his voice bursting through the fear. "Yes, I was right. He catches his breath as he skids to a halt. I always get there in the end. We have come to a stumbling stop beside the thing that we've been looking for, or one of the things at least. Hope flares up inside me. It's an elevator, a second elevator. The doors to this one are much larger and wider than the previous, and James hastily presses the button as we look it over. A whirring and a rumbling sounds up from beneath us. There is no LED above the elevator here to indicate what floor it's on, so we just have to wait anxiously until that dutiful hiss, and the doors grind their way open. The space in here is much larger than the one in our elevator, and there's no mirror along the walls either. We rush in and examine the buttons. "Wait," I say. "This one doesn't go up, it only goes down." And sure enough, it looks like we have two options. A button for -4, the floor that we're currently on, and a button for -X. I look at the others. "X it is then, I guess," I say quietly, and they nod grimly in response, elation already fast dissipating. I press the button and the door slides slowly shut. One more level to go. Down, down, down. But this is good, right? This is progress. We have confirmed the existence of other elevators. There will be a way out, there has to be. Our stomachs drop as the elevator accelerates down. We are silent as it descends. And when at last it opens, we are met with another long corridor. Dark and, as with the level above, humid. Black mold creeps across the walls. The fungus is rife. I lift my shirt back over my nose and mouth as we head out into the misery of the complex. Directly opposite us is a similarly sized door to the elevator, massive and shuttered off with metal. James checks all over this, looking for buttons or ways to get it open, clues or keypads, but he finds nothing. Maya and I walk the length of the corridor. It narrows out pretty quickly. In one direction, the passage quickly becomes lost to a jungle of fungus. It makes my skin crawl just looking down it. The other way is far clearer, so our path really is a no-brainer. Once James has, frustrated, given up for now his assault on the metal barrier, we walk down this new corridor. It is lined with pipes and various valves and is barely wide enough for two of us to walk side by side. It snakes this way and that, sometimes stretching forward in a completely straight line. But there are no doors, no offshooting corridors or alternate routes. And at long last, we are led right back to where we started. There is a moment of painful tension, and then James swears in frustration and kicks the wall. Maya slumps down against it. After all this way, we've just reached the elevator again. The first one, our elevator. After all that, we've just been led right back to the very same elevator. It's level -X doors, waiting for us, taunting us. Maya starts quietly sobbing. Dazed and defeated, I turn to the right. There's a doorway here and it leads into a gloomy and red-lit hallway, and so I head on through. Why the hell not? What will I find? There's no way out. James shouts in despair. There's no way out. Help us, anyone. How do we get out? My feet clank on metal mesh platform, kind of like the platforms on the level above, though maybe a little bit thicker. I quickly reach a rail and I put my hands on the bar, looking out over the edge. Ahead and below is the void. Steam churns quietly all around us. Vents blast and puff out bursts of the stuff, and already I can feel myself sweating worse than I did on the previous floor. To my left, the rail and the metal platform extends away into the darkness and the steam. To my right, it widens out a little. Styrofoam has been piled high in here. Cardboard too, now rotted. A dumping ground for waste and junk. And amongst them and steadily grinding and humming are a series of generators. One has been dislodged from its location, and it leans at an awkward angle. The rest remain fixed in place. These must be what continue to power the facility. There are 9 of them down here by my count, as I walk past them one by one, kicking aside some styrofoam as I do. 2 of them appear to be dead, but the remaining 7, including the one tipped at an awkward angle, all continue to blink and judder. Ancient but powerful things, keeping it all running, I guess, still doing their jobs after their masters have long since departed. I take a look down over the rail again, down into the great yawning chasm of nothingness below. If I squint, I feel like I can almost make out further platforms, dark and barely visible and way below, covered in shifting, crawling, shadowed shapes. Unease takes hold and I retreat from the railing, suddenly nauseous. Looking back to the doorway, I can see that I've been joined by James and Maya, both illuminated red in the faint blinking lights of the generators. They aren't looking down though, they're looking up. I do likewise. Above our heads and attached to the metal grids of the ceiling is an enormous, throbbing fungal mass. It is colossal, the largest of them all by far. Bulging tentacle-like vines connect the mass to the metal overhead and spread out wide like an intricate nervous system. Slime oozes down its sides. The mass is covered with eyes. They stare in different directions, but stare they do. Some at James, some at Maya, and some at me. Unblinking, watching in the darkness. I don't feel afraid though now. Perhaps I have exhausted my fear reserves. I think about the ghosts, about the young woman, the picture that I saw of her smiling with her colleagues, her rotted corpse strung up and defiled into that fungal spider. I think of the ghost of the man too. I wonder now if perhaps that was him in the water, the slithering fish. Please, they had said. Please. And I decide, like a strike of lightning on a course of action. I turn from the monster's fungus, this centerpiece of desolation, the mother mass. I run back across the platforms through the steam and return to the elevator, tearing off a piece of pre-damaged piping from the wall as I do so. Indy, what are you doing? James asks me, but I move past him into the corridor and press the button for the elevator. My heart beats fast, but I feel better now than I have at any other point on this terrible nightmarish night. The elevator whirs. Its doors stand silent and still, and then with a soft ding, they open on up. I look for the panel by the buttons, the one that says, "Do not open or engage prior to adequate shutdown. Risk of fire. Max weight 2,000 pounds. And I smash it as hard as I can with the pipe. With the first hit, the panel dents and little sparks fly from the cracks. Indy, Maya asks after me, but she doesn't try to stop me. I smack the pipe against the panel again and it cracks and dents further. More sparks fly. "Maya, grab some of the trash," I shout over my shoulder. "The styrofoam." She does so at once. She knows what I'm trying to do, and I'm not sure if James has caught on yet. I hit it over and over. I pull at the exposed wires and smack it as hard as I can. I press the buttons on the elevator and the doors try to repeatedly judder closed, but I don't let them. I keep forcing them back open even as I strike. Maya returns and I jam a load of the dryer cardboard and the styrofoam into the open paneling. "Burn," I shout loud, with perhaps just a hint of madness in the edge of my voice, and lo and behold, it does. Flames flicker out from the panel and I strike it again. The flames die down and then burst out again, redoubled in size. "What the hell are you doing?" James shouts with his hands on his head. "We're going to kill it, James," I tell him. "The fungus. We're going to burn it out. This ends." He stares at me as smoke starts to fill the compartment. "Dislodge the generator," I tell him as I encourage the fire to grow, feeding it with trash as it burns brighter and brighter. "The one at the end, try to get it disconnected from the walls." James pauses. He looks like he's going to question this, but then he just nods and takes off. "Maya, keep it going. Burn it bigger and brighter, more and more," I tell her, and she does as I say. I run back to the metal platforms of level -X, and with anger in my blood, I clamber up onto the lowest of the rails that mark the platform's edge, and I swing the pipe at the fungus again and again, attacking what I had perceived to be its weak point, where it looks the softest. Sludge bursts from the mass's sides and the eyes all swivel to stare right at me, staring into my soul as it vibrates furiously in response. Shadows move in the dark and the fire and the flames burn larger. I move forwards and backwards across the platform, grabbing up chunks of burning material and wedging them forcefully into the fungus's sides, right into the heart of the mother mass, into the weak spot that I tore out with the pipe. The fungus twitches and pulsates violently with every burning strike. The first few flames are extinguished quickly, and the mass's moisture and ooze, but Maya joins in with my efforts, and as the edges of the fungus begin to dry and crack in the heat, the flames start to take hold. Smoke billows out from the elevator and up towards the ceiling. I glance up. There's an enormous hole in the metal roofing not far away, and this is where the smoke seems to congregate and climb on up, and disappearing out of sight. I wonder idly if it might connect to that hole in the floor that Maya had found on level -1, all those long, long hours ago. The fungus thrums and throbs with rage. Its multitudes of horrendous eyes crack and melt in the searing heat as the fire begins to overtake it, and still Maya and I fan the flames. Burning trash is hurled right at it, stuffed into its sides. I scorch my hands a few times, but it doesn't faze me. The pupils of the mass's eyes all narrow as one, staring out with rage at its assailants, but it is undefended here, down here in the dark. And at last, with an unceremonious burst of gray-green ooze, the burning fungus disconnects from the ceiling. It hangs and swings by 3 thick, sticky threads, those tiny little worm-like tendrils flailing madly, and then 2 of those threads snap through and the fungus slams against the railing. The final eye stares up at me as it's engulfed in flames, and the final thread snaps too. Down goes the fungus, a burning fireball in the darkness. It illuminates in orange various pipes and platforms as it drops. We catch glimpses of terrible creatures lurking in the shadows, scampering away fearful of the light. And at last it crashes into a platform far below us, still sizzling and still smoking. But it isn't enough. We help James in the final stages of dislodging the generator, and with a great combined effort, we tip the machine, this vital organ of the facility, down over the railings after it. It too falls fast into the abyss, though its light is nowhere near as bright. Not until it strikes the smoldering fungus and the metal upon which it was cast. The generator bursts into an intense explosion that sends a ripple of heat all the way back up towards us, one that causes us to step back and shield our eyes. And then for a while there's quiet, just the sound of us three idiot teenagers catching our breath, the distant sizzling of the remains and ruins down below, and the flickering flames in the exterior behind us. I cough through the smoke and start to kick and haul away the pieces of burning trash by the elevator's edges. I use the pipe to reach in and separate the materials, and then sitting down on the metal mesh and close to the ground, we wait for the fires to burn themselves out. I would say it takes about 15 minutes. But at last, the final flame dies out, leaving behind it a blackened and scorched and smoky elevator room, lined with ash and with wires sparking out from its panel. "Do you think it'll still work?" I ask Maya and James after a moment. "Yeah," says James. "I'm sure it will. A bit of fire damage, it ain't nothing." "And even if it doesn't," Maya says, "we'll find another way. We'll for sure find another way out. We found another elevator and we can do the same again." She squeezes my hand. "Okay," I reply with an exhausted smile. "Shall we give it a try then?" "Yeah," James replies. "Let's do this." And so we clamber to our feet and into the elevator. The smoke is dispersed now, but it still reeks of ash and rot and burnt plastic. With another cough, I glance to the others and then carefully press the button to floor 0. There is silence for a second or two, an unsettling grinding noise, as if the elevator is struggling with a request. But then, as its purpose, it whirs and rumbles and the doors draw closed with a soft and familiar ding. And up it goes, up, ascending through the darkness. The LED flickers from -X to -4. I shift from foot to foot, waiting and hoping. Up from -4 to -3. Higher still from -3 to -2. What's going to happen, I think to myself? Will it take us back to the surface? Ascending up and up. And as it happens, it does not. Not yet, at least. The LED flickers over from -2 to -1, and here the elevator decelerates. James grips one of my hands and my other takes Maya's. The elevator slows to a stop, and as before, it slowly whirs open. The lights blink and drop, and we are plunged temporarily into darkness. And when they return, we see ourselves in the reflection, the mirror wall that the open doors of the elevator reveal to us. It reflects the mirror behind us and creates the illusion of a tunnel leading away into infinity. And in this tunnel are almost 36 people. Directly behind us are the young woman and the man, and behind them are others, dressed in lab coats and other such gear. It's the group from the framed photograph that we found on level -4, the final line of defense. They shimmer and they smile. Their eyes have not rotted around the sockets. They are as they were, at their best. My heart beats fast, but I am not afraid. "Thank you," mouths the ghostly young woman, and I smile at her. The elevator doors to floor -1 were quietly closed of their own accord, and at last it whirs on, ascending. Back up we go to level 0, back to the forest. And when the doors finally open, we are rushed with a cool and glorious breath of fresh forest air. It spills into the open compartment, and we are illuminated in the light of the moon and stars, and our ghostly cohort streams steadily out through the doors. In human forms at first, but fading quickly into nothing more than silvery starlight, they disperse into the air around us, and then they vanish peacefully away. I don't know quite what to say. I don't think any of us do. So we simply head on out and back through the forest. The leaves crunch beneath our feet, and I hear the sound of a soft ding behind us as the elevator doors were closed.